Tonight, we return to a village tucked into the mountainside, where mist coils up from the valley like the breath of the earth and sky, and the cries of a newborn echo like an awakening bell in the quiet night. You are walking slowly up the dirt path leading to the hill, the dampness of your straw sandals seeping through to your heels. On your shoulder is a soft cloth bag containing a few dried ginger roots, a handful of mugwort leaves, and a piece of white cloth that has been boiled in 3 waters. The air is cool, but not biting. And over there, where a faint light flickers like a lone star on a thatched roof, a mother in labor awaits your presence. You are not a physician, not a Zen master. You are the village midwife, a quiet soul, living in the shadow of the old stupa, where the bell no longer rings, but is only stirred by the wind. Your task is not to battle life or death, but simply to welcome both as they arrive. No resistance, no haste, only breath, hands, and compassion. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you wish, leave the name of your city and your current time below. Sometimes, just knowing we are not alone in the night is enough to feel a little lighter. Now, dim the lights for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The hill is still. The moon, hazy and faint, drifts silently over the temple roof. You bow your head as you pass through the decaying wooden gate of the old temple, a place that has witnessed hundreds of arrivals and farewells. Inside, the small oil lamp flickers, faint as the breath of the woman in labor. You gently set down your cloth bag, wash your hands with water heated in an earthen pot, and sit beside the young woman trembling through her first pains. She grips your hand, clutching it like a blade of grass in a great storm. You say nothing. You simply place a hand on her forehead and listen. Each contraction is a knock on the door, and your task is to open it without fear, without grasping. You remember the first time you did this work. You were trembling, too, even more than the girl lying here now. You were only 17 then, following your mother to the home of a poor woman in labor. Poverty has a way of silencing people, and it was in that silence that you learned your first lesson. Stillness, too, is a form of medicine. You look around the room, seeing a reflection of your younger self in this girl. The fragility, the waiting, and then, suddenly, the first cry rings out, not loud, not demanding, but like a breath released from the very earth. A new soul has arrived, gently, humbly, like a dewdrop on a bamboo leaf. No one claps, no one cheers, but the atmosphere in the room has shifted. Something is lighter, brighter, as if light is seeping through the cracks in the old wooden walls. You wrap the baby in the warm cloth, place it on the mother's chest, and watch them breathe together a new rhythm formed from 2 bodies, 2 lives, and countless causes converging. You smile, not for a miracle, but for a simple truth. Everything has happened exactly as it needed to. Not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. Like an afternoon rain in June, silent, sufficient, and then gone. You sit for a while by the window, your back against the old bamboo wall where moss has begun to grow. The sky is softening to a pearly gray, heralding a dawn that is quietly approaching from the east. The first rooster crows in the distance, a gentle reminder that time flows on, whether we notice or not. In your hands, the soft silk cloth is still stained with a little blood and fluid. But to you, these are not traces of suffering. They are traces of a beginning. Blood, water, and breath. These three have always accompanied you in your work. Nearby, a small bronze wind chime hangs from the eaves. When the wind passes, its sound is not loud, just a faint whisper. But in moments like these, you remember your old teacher, a nameless old man the villagers called the keeper of the stupa. You were very young then. One day, while bringing medicine to the temple, you found him sitting cross-legged at the base of the stupa, eyes half closed, a fistful of grass in his hand. No one ever taught you how to meditate or breathe correctly. But watching him, you felt drawn into a wordless quiet. Later, when you asked why he sat like that for so long, he simply replied, "To hear the wind chime without waiting for the wind." You didn't understand then, but this morning, sitting in the stillness after a birth, when everything has settled, you hear the chime's gentle touch on the edge of the unseen world, and you know that perhaps you finally understand a small part of it. You rise and walk along the wooden corridor, stepping over stones worn smooth by countless feet. On your way, you pause under the small Bodhi tree beside the stupa. An old monk brought it from the south and planted it the year you began your apprenticeship. It was just a small sapling then. Now its canopy is large enough to shade half the temple roof. Leaves fall with each gust of wind, like weightless teachings drifting toward the infinite. Not far away, on the side of the temple, is a dry well, long since out of use. But after every birth, you still stop by and drop a pinch of salt into it. No one told you to do this. It was just a habit from your mother's time, to let the old things run dry, she used to say, so they do not cling to the newborn. You look down into the well and see your reflection, blurred in the still water. Your hair is flecked with silver now, your eyes less bewildered than in your youth. You are not a perfect person. Not everyone likes you, and sometimes you are still afraid. But at this moment, in the indistinct light of early morning, you feel you are in the right place, like a tree growing in its proper season, or a cry that rises just when it is needed. The sound of footsteps comes from behind you. A young woman from the village, carrying a basket of vegetables, has come to offer a gift of thanks: a few eggs, a bunch of scallions, and a handkerchief embroidered with an unbloomed lotus. You bow your head in gratitude, saying little, just placing a hand over your left breast, as is your custom when receiving something precious. Then you turn toward the high hill where the temple stupa stands in silent contemplation, its roof tiles covered in moss, its wooden walls faded like eyes that have witnessed countless separations. You walk on. There are other places to go, other cries awaiting your hands, hands that once did not know what to do, but have now learned how to do nothing at all, to just be present, to just be still. Presence, you realize, is the greatest gift. Without words, without explanation, just a gentle block of silence in the swirling chaos of the world. And the strange thing is this: it is when you try to change nothing that everything begins to shift on its own. You leave the temple as the morning sun just begins to grace the tops of the pine trees. The dirt path leading back to the small village winds along the hillside, where the mist has not yet fully lifted, still clinging to the tips of the grass. On your shoulder is the old cloth bag, but inside it holds so many new things: the first cry of a child, the relieved sigh of a mother, and the warmth that has not yet cooled in the palm of your hand. Passing through the simple bamboo gate into your own courtyard, you suddenly stop. A strange scent is on the wind, not the smell of kitchen smoke or damp earth, but the fragrance of a freshly bloomed dandelion, a rarity in these high mountains. It reminds you of a day long ago, the first time you delivered a baby alone. The mother that day was not a villager. She and her husband were travelers, looking for seasonal work. When her labor began too early, they frantically sought help, and you, only 18 at the time, were the only one nearby. With no one to guide you, no one to ask, you only remembered what your mother had done, wiping the forehead, holding the hand, breathing with the mother, not out of courage, but because you could not stand by and watch a soul enter the world in solitude. The birth was probably not perfect. The baby was tiny, frail, so weak you thought he might never make a sound. But then, as you gently touched his chest, as if touching the first wind of the season, a thin cry escaped. It was not a resonant sound, but it was enough to bring tears to the mother's eyes. And you understood that you didn't need to do anything great. You only needed to be there at the right time, with all your heart. That same day, as you went to the well to wash your hands, a Bodhi leaf fell right in front of you. Not from the temple tree, but from somewhere far away, carried by the wind. It was yellowed and withered. Its edges curled slightly like the smile of one who has understood everything. You kept it, pressing it into your notebook, and wrote the first line of your life as a midwife. Death is never far from birth. They walk together, like a body and its shadow. You smile at the memory. Some moments never leave us. They follow us silently through life like a shadow in the afternoon sun. And it is because of them that you learned in every living being, even one that exists for only a single breath. There is a wordless lesson about the sacredness of being. You cross the small bamboo bridge over the stream, where the water murmurs like a whisper from the earth's heart. Pausing, you stoop to scoop some water onto your face, feeling the cool touch on your tired but not exhausted skin. An unnamed gratitude rises within you. Gratitude for still being here, for still doing the work you did not choose, but which is bound to you like a silent vow to the universe. Ahead is a low, roofed wooden house. An elderly woman, Old Lady Duyen, is sitting on the porch, waving you over. She no longer gives birth. It has been a long, long time. But every time you pass, she calls you in for tea. It's always lotus tea, cured in dried lotus leaves from the pond behind the temple. And every time, she asks, "Did anyone arrive today?" You nod. A little girl, dark hair, eyes not yet open, but her hands are clenched tight. The old woman smiles, pouring more tea into your earthenware cup. Clenching is good, but remember, my child, eventually, one must learn to let go. You are silent. You have heard that line so many times. But each time someone else says it, it touches a different place in your heart. And perhaps that is why you have not yet given up this work. Not because you love the feeling of sitting beside someone moaning in pain, but because each time you learn something new. About people, about impermanence, about the terrifying silence that is sometimes the very ground from which compassion sprouts. After leaving old lady Duyen's house, you follow a winding dirt path toward the bamboo forest at the foot of the mountain. This path is a shortcut to the small hut where you dry bundles of mugwort, warm white cloths over a fire, and infuse ginger in rice wine to keep your hands warm during cold nights of labor. On the way, you stop by a bush of wild beetle, plucking a few tender green leaves, the kind your mother used to wipe the foreheads of women writhing in childbirth. You lift a leaf to your nose and smell its pungent, slightly spicy warmth, like a memory itself. The bamboo hut is nestled at the edge of the forest, its roof thatched with dry straw, its walls pieced together from thin planks of wood, with no door. You set down your carrying pole and step inside, into a thin cloud of dust rising from the packed earth floor. A low table made of jackfruit wood sits in the center, cluttered with various items: bronze scissors, hemp cord, silk cloths, a few dried leaves, a ceramic bowl of ash water, and a string of prayer beads, broken in half. You pour water from an earthen jug into a small cup, lifting it to your lips without hurrying to drink. A light breeze rustles the thatched roof, making it sound like someone is wiping away old memories. You look out the window and see the sun filtering through the bamboo grove, casting long, striped shadows on the ground. That sun, that bamboo, those shadows, they're all a part of you, not separate, not distinct. You place your hand on a worn, faded notebook and open it to a page where words written in faint charcoal ink read, "Salt, water, and blood are the first things to welcome a new soul." You once read this line in an ancient sutra left behind by an old monk after his final rainy season retreat. You didn't understand it then, but over the years, each time you placed your hand on the contracting belly of a mother, you felt it more clearly. Life does not arrive in cleanliness or order, but in chaos, pain, and wetness. And yet, from that very place, a new realm of serenity slowly unfolds. You remember a special birth last year, a young mother named Hoa, disowned by her family for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. She had fled to the mountains, living in a dilapidated, abandoned shack, where you found her in a state of pain and despair. There was no one else, just the two of you, and the flickering light of a half-burnt candle. The baby was born in silence, no cry, no breath. You gently stroked the baby's back, rubbed its chest, blew warm air into its tiny mouth, but the baby did not respond. Hua broke down sobbing, but you did not, because in that moment, you understood that what was needed was not to cling to life, but to lean into death as an inseparable part of it. You wrapped the baby in a cloth, held it to your heart, and recited the verse on impermanence your mother had taught you. What is born will also pass away. Like a dewdrop on morning grass, do not grasp, do not blame, let love go lightly. The next day, you and Hoa buried the baby under the persimmon tree behind the temple. There was no incense, no chanting, only silence. And in that silence, you heard something. Nothing is ever lost. Everything only changes form. You touch your forehead, a gesture to remind yourself, and then stand up. The work is not done. The mugwort needs more sun. The ash water needs to be filtered. And the red threads used to tie the wrists of newborns need to be lengthened. These are small things, but to you, each action is a meditation. Each knot tied a reminder you are not here to heal the world, but only to be present with it as fully as you can. You look up and see wild birds gliding across the deep blue sky. They do not fly in formation. They have no clear direction, yet they find their way. You are the same. No maps, no scriptures, but every baby, every ragged breath, every silent pain has shown you the way, the path of compassion that needs no name, no title. And then, like a bell echoing from afar, you remember the old monk's words from long ago. There are 3 things that can never be held back: time, the wind, and the first cry of a newborn. You leave the hut as the sun reaches its zenith. The brilliant light filters through the bamboo leaves, creating a shifting pattern of bright patches, turning the ground into a tapestry woven with gold. In the cloth bag at your hip, you carry a few perilla leaves and a little ginger wine to visit a mother who gave birth 3 days ago. Newborns often get fussy on the 3rd day, and you know that just hearing your familiar voice will soothe both mother and child. On the way, you stop by the temple, where the bell has long been silent, but still hangs quietly in the wind. You sit on the cool stone steps, your fingers tracing the broken string of prayer beads. Only 49 beads remaining. A young nun walks by, bows her head in greeting, and silently continues sweeping leaves in the courtyard. Watching her, you suddenly recall an old conversation with the master. Back then, you had just lost a baby during a difficult birth. Nothing had gone wrong. The baby's heart had stopped in the womb, but that didn't lessen your self-blame. You went to the temple and sat numbly under a tree, your hands trembling, not knowing what to say to the young mother who had just endured a nameless grief. The master simply sat beside you, asking nothing. After a long while, he finally spoke. The bell does not ring on its own. It only chimes when the wind comes. You asked, "Are you telling me to wait for the wind?" "Master," he replied, "no. I am telling you not to take responsibility for a wind you cannot blow." From that day on, you stop striving to do it right, to save, or to avoid mistakes. Instead, you learn to listen, to be present, and to recognize that some things do not belong to you, nor do they need to belong to anyone. Some babies cry out loud at birth. Others just open their eyes, look around, and quietly fall into an eternal sleep. Both are part of life. You stand, brush off your clothes, and leave the temple. Beneath the ancient tree, a few leaves drift down like pieces of time shedding their bodies. You touch the bark, rough and cracked, yet warm from within. Time, like this tree trunk, may leave its marks on you, but it cannot extinguish the life smoldering inside. The mother's house is just a short walk from the temple. As you enter, the cry of a baby fills the air like the background music of life itself. The mother is sitting with her back against the wall, her eyes dark-ringed from lack of sleep. When she sees you, she says nothing, only lets out a sigh of relief and hands you the baby as if you were the only pillow she could rest against. You hold the child, the palm of your hand against its tiny back, feeling a warmth seep into the spaces between your fingers like a whisper. The baby stops fussing, its eyes open, not clearly seeing, but perhaps just reflecting the light. And in that moment, you feel seen. You ask the mother if she is tired. She nods, tears rolling down her cheeks. Not from pain, but from gratitude. I thought I couldn't do it. Not strong enough, not skilled enough, not enough of anything. You sit down beside her, pour some water, and say gently, "You don't need to be enough. You only need to be here." The baby doesn't need a perfect mother. It just needs its mother. She nods. And for the first time in 3 long days, a smile blooms on her face. Outside, the wind rustles the thatched roof. The sound of bamboo leaves whispers like the voices of mothers who came before, who held their children, soothed them, and then sent them off to grow up in the world. You stay a little longer. Lay the baby down on a cotton blanket and take a red thread from your bag, gently tying it around the tiny wrist. The gesture itself holds no magic, but in your heart, it is a thread of reminder: be present, love, and then let go lightly. On the way back, you think of the wind chime. It has not yet rung, but you know the wind will come. There is no need to wait for it. You only need to be present. You return by the old path, this time following the dirt road on the western side of the hill, where houses are fewer, but the forest shade is deep. At the end of the road is a low, roofed house with whitewashed earthen walls, set amid a lush vegetable garden where rows of cabbage, onions, and perilla bushes jostle for space in the afternoon sun. It was there, long ago, that you assisted in a strange birth, an experience that never faded from your memory, a set of twins, but only one survived. It was already dark then. No moon, no stars, only the chirping of insects and the flicker of an oil lamp that cast light no further than a hand's breadth. The young mother, her face pale from blood loss, was nearly unconscious. The first baby was born normally, crying as soon as he met the air, just like any other child. But the second, smaller, was blue and still. You tried everything, gently shaking her, blowing air into her tiny mouth, using your calloused fingers to press rhythmically on her chest. No one spoke. The family stood in silence, their hopeful eyes fixed on you as if you held that life in the palm of your hand. But she never opened her eyes, not a single cry, just a tiny body, soft as a cloud, lying peacefully in your arms. And the mother, who had just regained consciousness, did not scream. She just looked at you, her eyes like a lake about to freeze over. You sat down beside her, placed the baby in her arms, and said softly, "She came to be held, if only for a moment." In that instant, the room was no longer a place of birth. It was a sanctuary with no statues, no chants, only a love so silent and pure it made you want to kneel. The mother held her child for a long, long time, and you sat beside her all through the night, without sleep, without leaving. The next morning, the family quietly placed the baby in a small wooden box and buried her in the garden under a banana tree. On the fresh mound of earth, you stuck a branch of eucalyptus in place of incense, and as you left, you bowed your head as if bidding farewell to an honored guest, because even in her brief existence, she had left something profound in everyone's heart. The presence of loss can also be a gift. After that, whenever you passed that garden, you always paused for a few minutes, not to reminisce, but simply to breathe, to remember that there are things no one can understand the reason for, but their presence still creates a necessary silence in the symphony of life. Today, when you arrive at that same house, the mother from long ago is hanging diapers on a line. The surviving child, a girl, can now run and play, her eyes as bright as the morning star. She greets you politely, then runs off to the back garden. The mother smiles, puts a kettle on the stove, and pours you a cup of ginger tea. She asks about her sister. She says quietly, even though she never saw her. You nod. Perhaps her sister is blowing wind down for her, so she can always run faster than it. You both smile. A smile that doesn't hide the scar, but cherishes it as an inseparable part of life. You watch the little girl playing in the late afternoon sun, gathering dry leaves, blowing on a bamboo flute, and your heart feels light. That child carries within her not just life, but also memory, and a sorrow that has transformed into quiet understanding. As you leave, you feel a faint breeze brush against the back of your neck. Not strong, not cold, just a gentle touch, like a blessing from someone very far away, yet very near. You turn your head to look, seeing nothing but the long shadows of the bamboo and the sound of the girl's flute echoing in the air. And you know in that moment, the bell has rung. You continue on the small stone path leading north of the village to a humble house situated among terraced rice fields. There, when you were in your 30s, something happened that no one in the village has forgotten. A boy with 2 empty hands, who brought nothing but left you with your deepest lesson. He was about 8 years old then, thin and lanky, his face smudged with dirt. You were standing in the temple courtyard, washing your hands after a birth at the home of a young nun who often helped you prepare herbs and cloths. When you saw him approach stealthily, there were no footsteps, only a curious and slightly anxious gaze. Thinking he had come to beg for food, you opened your bag to take out a ball of sticky rice wrapped in a banana leaf. But he didn't take it. He shook his head, pointed to your belly, and then to the belly of a pregnant woman standing nearby, as if to ask, "Are you the one who calls babies out of their mother's wombs?" You nodded, a surprised smile on your face. He nodded back, then opened his 2 small hands to show you they were empty. You waited. He remained silent, his hands still open. Then he smiled, bowed to you, and ran away. That was all. You didn't understand it at the time. A boy who came, asked for nothing, gave nothing, only to show you his empty hands and smile. But for days after, every time you replayed the scene in your mind, your heart stirred. Those empty hands, could they have been a reminder that one need not bring anything, nor leave anything behind? One only needs to be present, with a spaciousness like a field after harvest, like the sky before a rain. The more spacious you are, the more room there is for love to dwell. A few months later, you heard that the boy was the son of a mute woman who lived at the edge of the village and had just died of illness. He wandered everywhere, with no relatives, no papers, no real name. No one knew for sure where he came from. But for you, his image remained more vivid than any adult who had ever crossed your path. From then on, you started leaving a part of your bag empty whenever you went to a birth. Not to hold anything, but to remind yourself, be empty. Empty enough to listen, to receive, to not crowd the sacred space of life and death with old knowledge or habits. You taught this to your apprentices later on. One girl once asked you, "If I know nothing, if I don't have enough experience, can I still do this work?" You smiled. If you carry too much, your hands will have no room to hold the newborn. Emptiness is not a lack. It is the condition for receiving. Returning to the present, you stop under a large kapok tree by the road. This was once a place where villagers hung red cloth strips to pray for the safety of mothers and newborns. The strips are now faded, swaying in the wind like blessings from the past. You take a new piece of cloth from your bag, tie it to the lowest branch, and whisper, for the babies who were never named, and for the mothers who learned to let go. You sit at the base of the tree for a while, your back against its sturdy trunk. The slanted sunlight falls on your hair, illuminating the silver strands like morning dew. You feel neither sad nor happy, just a gentle awareness, like the surface of a still lake reflecting a sky so clear it seems like emptiness itself. And then you stand up and continue on your way, because somewhere in the village, another call may have already come for you, a wordless call, carried on the wind, touching the palm of your hand. And you know that next time you will go with empty hands and a full heart. The day is slowly turning to late afternoon. The sunlight is no longer harsh, but spreads gently like a thin silk cloth over the thatched roofs, the distant mountain peaks, and the very path you walk on. The wind has changed direction. You can smell the scent of decaying leaves, of smoke from burning fields, and faintly, the smell of new milk still lingering on your hands from the morning. Your next destination is the house behind the bamboo grove, the place where a very special mother gave birth in the middle of a fire. Not a metaphor. It was a real fire. And life, at that moment, was not welcomed with warm blankets, but with smoke-scorched hands. The story began on a summer night, when the air was so humid the ground itself seemed to steam. You were asleep when someone came running, calling for you urgently. Leora's house was on fire. A lightning bolt from a thunderstorm had struck the thatched roof. While the villagers rushed to put out the flames, she went into labor. You ran to the scene, barefoot, your clothes soaked with sweat and rain. The fire had spread to the storage shed, red light flaring in waves like a snarling beast. In the small room behind the kitchen, Leora lay amidst the smoke. There were no clean cloths, no clean water, only a hastily spread mat and trembling hands. You don't remember what you did first, only that you knelt, took her hand, and began to breathe deeply, steadily, as if that breath were the only bridge to calmness in a sea of chaos. The baby was born just as the shed collapsed. A gasp, not quite a cry, rose above the sound of shouting people and the crackling of burning bamboo. You held the baby, wrapping him in the wet hem of your tunic, and told yourself, "We made it through." After the fire was extinguished, they found you sitting on the porch steps, holding the baby, your eyes gazing into the distance. You weren't crying, nor were you smiling. But inside you, something had changed. You began to believe that life doesn't need perfect conditions to manifest. It just needs an opening, a little courage, a moment of fearlessness, and someone willing to be present. Today, you return to that place. The house has been rebuilt, this time with bricks and a tiled roof. Leora greets you with a radiant smile. Her son, the child born in fire, is now 10 years old. His name is Ashen, named for the soot that covered their old home. He is a quiet child, but his eyes are unusually bright, as if he has seen more than his years would allow. You sit with Leora in the courtyard, sipping ginger tea, your eyes following Ashen as he draws a sun on the dirt with a stick. She tells you that he often says to his friends, "I came from fire, but inside, I am water." You can't help but smile. In your mind, the fire from that night still burns, no longer terrifying, but like a smoldering sutra each time you remember it. You are enlightened a little more. You learn that life is not something you control, but a current you learn to stand with. In the midst of chaos, you don't stop the wind, you don't fight the fire, you just hold out your hand, and that is enough. As the sky darkens, you ask to leave. Ashen runs over and places a small stone he found in the stream into your hand. For you to carry, he says, to remember that a stone can be in a fire and still stay cool. You nod, closing your hand around the stone, holding on to a piece of the memory, not to cling to it, but to remind yourself all the things that once burned. You can also be the things that teach you the gentlest way to touch the world. You walk away under the sunset, your heart as warm as long-banked embers. And for the first time in months, you hear a bell chiming within you, not from the temple, not from the ancient stupa, but from inside yourself. You walk slowly up the slope, where the dirt path winds gently between rows of wild chrysanthemums blooming in a brilliant yellow. Their petals tremble in the twilight breeze, as if wanting to tell a story, small but deeply earnest. Each step brings you closer to an old wooden house, the site of a silent, arresting moment, a simple dialogue that forever changed how you viewed suffering, a young mother's question. Why me? That day, you had come because the villager said she was in a state of shock. Her first child had been stillborn, the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. No one dared to say anything. No one dared to enter. Her husband had left in her 6th month of pregnancy. When you stepped into that small room, she was sitting motionless, her eyes empty, as if she had left everything behind on the other side of her pain. You brought no words of comfort. There was nothing to say in such a space. You just sat down beside her, sharing the silence. It was a thick silence, stretching on like an evening fog that refused to lift. After a long while, she turned and asked, without looking at you, "What did I do wrong?" You remember breathing very slowly, as if borrowing the earth's own breath to answer. You did nothing wrong. Some things just happen when the conditions are right. She shook her head. But why me? You did not try to explain. Instead, you told her the old story of a woman who came to the Buddha, cradling the body of her dead son, begging him to work a miracle. The Buddha told her to bring him a mustard seed from any house that had never known death. The mother went through the entire village, from door to door, but could find none. When she returned, she understood no one is spared from loss. You told the young mother, "I cannot tell you this pain will disappear, but I can sit here with it, with you." She began to cry, not like a storm, but like a small stream beginning to trickle in the quiet of the night. You let her tears soak the shoulder of your tunic, not wiping them, not moving away, just letting them pass like rain over a thatched roof. From that day on, you learned that questions like, "Why me?" don't need an answer. They need a space to exist. And your job was not to explain, but to hold that space for others, for yourself, for all the things unknown. Today, you return to that house. The mother from that time, her name is Ava, now has a little boy, 2 years old. The house is still simple, but it has a new coat of paint, a hammock swaying on the porch, and children's drawings hanging on the walls. Ava greets you with a look that is different now, no longer empty, but the gaze of someone who has walked through a long night and learned to accept the dawn, even if she didn't expect it. You hold her son, rocking him gently, smiling, and whisper, "Hello, little one. Your mother has been waiting for you for a long time. As you are about to leave, Ava walks you to the gate. She takes your hand, hesitates, then says, "Back then, you didn't explain, but you stayed. That alone was enough." You hold her hand, looking into her eyes as if into a pool of water that has settled after a rain. Because I once asked the same question you did, and someone sat with me on your way back. You think silently of all the times you had no answers, all the times you just sat still. But it was from those times that you learned something no one can teach: presence, even without words, can be the light that guides someone who is lost. And perhaps, because of that, the bell still doesn't need the wind to ring. The afternoon descends gently, like an old silk scarf steeped in mist and the scent of damp earth. You turn down a small, less traveled path, hidden by hibiscus hedges that grow chest high. This path leads to a special place, a small house at the edge of the forest, where you once delivered a baby for a young woman named Iris. But what made that birth unforgettable was not the child, but the mother. Iris was the very baby you had delivered over 20 years before. You remember that day clearly, though it was long ago. Iris's mother, a quiet woman with deep, soulful eyes, gave birth on a night when the forest rain fell in sheets. The baby girl arrived quickly, her tiny hands clutching your finger as if she had known you from a past life. Her mother named her Iris for her strangely pale violet eyes, a gentle coincidence with the flower that bloomed that season. As time passed, you didn't see them much. Iris's mother died young. She was raised by an uncle and then left the village to study far away. It was only when she was pregnant with her first child that she returned, seeking you out on an afternoon just as rainy as the day she was born. That time, you were moved to see Iris standing at the temple gate, her hands cradling her belly, her eyes brimming with tears. "Auntie," she said, her voice trembling, "the baby inside me is the only life left from my mother." You understood. The pregnancy was not just about a new soul. It was the continuation of a loss. It was an unlit stick of incense, a greeting that was never spoken. The birth took place in a newly built house in the forest. There were only two of you and Iris. She was in pain, but she didn't scream. She bit down, breathed along with you, keeping a rhythm as if she had memorized an old melody of the earth and sky. When the baby was born, no one spoke. No one needed to. In Iris's eyes, you saw her mother's gaze from long ago, a look of gratitude, sorrow, and peace, all at once. You wrapped the baby in a blanket Iris had embroidered herself, a red spider lily curving into a circle. She placed her hand on her child's chest, her eyes still fixed on you. "Do you believe my mother is here?" she asked, her voice like wind brushing against leaves. You nodded, not because you believed or disbelieved, but because you understood the living need something to hold on to in the precarious moment between birth and death. Today, you return to Iris's house, not for a new birth, but because of a vague calling in your heart. The house is more established now, its wooden walls repainted, its thatched roof replaced with tiles. In the yard, her little girl named Amara is playing by herself, humming a lullaby that sounds like the chirping of forest birds. She has her mother's pale violet eyes and hair that curls like a stream around stones. Iris invites you in and brews a pot of lotus tea that has been steeping under a full moon. She tells you that Amara loves to stand by the window every morning, watching the clouds and listening to the birds. Every bird call is a dream that hasn't slept yet. The little girl says, "You ask nothing more. You just sit there, your hands wrapped around the warm teacup, your eyes on the child drawing in the fading light. And in that moment, you no longer feel like the one who brings life into the world. You are just a small link in an endless chain of causes and conditions, a connection that, though invisible, is full in every breath." Before you leave, Amara runs over and presses a dried branch wrapped in purple thread into your hand. "For you," she says, "this leaf can hear the wind." You don't reply. You just accept the small gift with the two hands that have held so many lives. And as you walk out the wooden gate, you suddenly realize all these years, every time you delivered a baby, you were, in fact, being reborn yourself, learning to be softer, lighter, and quiet enough to hear the wind pass, carrying with it laughter, tears, and greetings from souls you have never met. The sun has disappeared behind the mountain range, leaving a faint orange glow that stretches along the quiet horizon. You slow your pace, not because you are tired, but because something in the air makes you want to step more lightly, to breathe more deeply, as if approaching a sacred place where only silence is permitted to enter. Ahead is an old house with eaves that curve downward like long, sleepy eyelashes. This is the place where you once did not arrive in time. One cold night, long ago, you were called too late. The woman, her name was Eleanor, gave birth in wrenching pain, with no one beside her, no one to guide her breathing, no hand to hold when the pain cut to the bone. When you got there, all that remained was the sound of wind whistling through the cracks in the walls and a silence as heavy as stone. The mother was exhausted. The baby was already gone. It had all been over for a long time. You knelt by her bed, your heart filled with regret. She didn't blame you. She only asked softly, "If you had been here, would it have been different?" You did not answer, because, in truth, you did not know. You had been too far away that day. Another birth had taken longer than expected, and by the time you left, it was already dark, the rain falling in disarray like ragged breaths. You walked through the forest, stumbling over wet leaves, slipping 3 times, your oil lamp extinguishing halfway. When you arrived, all you could do was sit there, your hand holding one that was already cold. And that was the first time you truly understood your own limits. Not every birth holds a miracle. Not every presence arrives in time. But you also realized people don't just need a midwife's hands. They need a heart that knows how to bow, how to apologize, how to be silent before a sorrow that cannot be changed. After that day, you started keeping a small piece of black cloth in your bag, not for mourning, but to remind yourself some things cannot be saved. And it is not because we are not good enough. It is because some bells ring not to summon someone, but to announce that something has already passed. Today, you return to that house. Eleanor still lives there, alone, as quiet as a contemplative cypress tree. She answers the door with a smile, as if you had only been gone for an afternoon. Neither of you mentions the past, but you know you are both reliving that fateful night, every flicker of the oil lamp, every drop of rain on your hair, every handshake that was chillingly cold. Eleanor pours tea, her hands still trembling, slightly, as they did before. She places a small wooden box on the table and says, "My baby left nothing behind, but I keep the cloth you wrapped her in, to remember that someone came." You look at the box, then at her, and your heart feels as if an old knot has just been untied. You may not have arrived in time to welcome a new soul, but you were there to witness, to listen, to bow before what had already happened. When it is completely dark, you ask to leave. Eleanor walks you to the door, holding a small bamboo lantern. She says, "This time, you arrived right on time." You turn to look at her one last time, saying nothing, only touching your left breast, where your heart still aches whenever you remember things left incomplete. But it is in that very place that you hold something more precious than any success: humility. You leave the old house, your mind as still as a lake after a long, persistent rain. In the darkness, the forest path is no longer frightening, because for the first time, you see it clearly: the lost steps. The times you didn't make it are also part of the journey, and every cry that was never uttered, every hand that was never held, still leaves a gentle echo, like prayer beads falling silently into the night. The night has fallen completely, but it is not the kind of thick darkness that inspires fear. This night is as light as a thin scarf draped over all things, softening every sound, as if the whole world has closed its eyes. You are on your way back to the temple, but your feet unconsciously lead you to the old room deep in the back courtyard, where you keep something no one else has ever touched: your birth ledger. The book is not thick. Its cover is made of coarse burlap, once damp, once singed at a corner, once torn and sewn back together with red thread. It contains no complete list of names, no specific dates, no complex symbols. Each line is a memory, a baby, a birth, a small thing you wanted to remember. Sometimes it was a cry that rang out like a bronze bell. Sometimes it was just the way a mother's hand gripped yours when she thought she was going to die. Sometimes it was only the quiet sigh of a father who didn't dare enter the birthing room. You open the ledger, sitting under the oil lamp on an old mat, tracing the faded characters with your finger. One entry simply reads, "Heavy rain. Baby born at the exact moment lightning struck as mother cried out." Another says, "A girl named Mira. Eyes wouldn't open, but her hand held on so tight. One line you crossed out and rewrote. Didn't make it in time. The baby was gone." The mother said, "It's enough that you came." Not everyone was recorded here. Only the moments that left you speechless, that made you sit for a long time after everything was over. This ledger was not for inventory or for show. It was something you wrote for yourself, so that every time you felt doubt or weariness, you could open it and remember why you started. You think of what Master Calden once said, the old monk who lived as a hermit in the pine forest to the west, where the birds never sang because the fog was always thick until noon. One day, you brought him medicine and lamented your feeling of uselessness when faced with the pain of others. He just smiled gently and pointed to a worn cliff face. "Water does not break stone with its strength," he said. "It breaks it with its presence." Tonight, you feel that truth so clearly. Every birth, every child, every cry, every drop of blood, you did not solve them. You were not successful in every case, but you were present. And that is the true substance of your life. You turn to the last page, still blank, a clean white page, waiting for a new story. Your hand touches the pen, hesitates. Finally, you write, "Every child who enters this world brings a lesson. Every mother is a verse on endurance and letting go. And I am only the one who writes it down." You close the book, place it back in the wooden box beside your pillow, and blow out the lamp. Outside, the insects chirp, and the wind through the trees sounds like the whispers of the little souls you once held in your arms, and perhaps once was enough. You lie down, not falling asleep right away, but letting your thoughts drift like clouds over the mountains. Maybe tomorrow there will be a new birth. Maybe not. But either way, you know whether you arrive on time or late. Whether the cry is loud or silent, you will still go. With empty hands, with a soft heart, with eyes ready to welcome something that has never yet been named. And so, even if no one rings the bell, you know every step you take still creates a sound, gentle enough to make someone else feel less alone in the long night. You awaken before the sky is fully light. A silver mist envelops the temple courtyard, making everything seem to be floating in some realm beyond time. The first birds of the day are still hesitant, their small chirps only occasionally stitching the fabric of the sky. You pull on your cloak, tie back your hair, and quietly leave your room. Not to go far, just to walk around the temple, to feel your feet still touching the ground, and your heart still as soft as the moss on the stones under the eaves. You stop under the Bodhi tree in the front courtyard, where you often sit in meditation after a birth. This tree grew up with you. The year you began your apprenticeship, it was only chest high. Now, its canopy shades almost the entire meditation hall, its aerial roots touching the earth like the gentle, silver hair of an elder. You sit down, your back against its trunk, and close your eyes, not to meditate, just to listen. And in that stillness, another memory surfaces as light as the steam from freshly poured tea. A baby girl who was almost never born because her mother had intended to end the pregnancy. You remember that day as clearly as a line on your palm. The woman, Isolde, had dark circles under her eyes and a dazed expression. She had no parents, no one to rely on, and was pregnant from a love affair without promises. She came to the temple not to seek help. She just wanted someone to nod in agreement with her decision. You didn't lecture her. You didn't say you should or you shouldn't. You just offered her tea and let her sit there for a long time, a very long time, until the tea was cold, until the sky had changed color 3 times, until the birds had flown away and returned. Isolde finally looked up and asked, "If you were me, what would you do?" You sighed. You didn't try to preach. You just told her about a time you thought you could never do anything decent in your life. And then a child was born into your hands, with no one to help, no one to witness. But that child looked at you, held your hand, as if welcoming you into a new world. It was a simple moment, but from then on, you never again doubted your own presence. You said, "Not everyone is born to be a mother, but if this child comes, it doesn't come to force you to be anyone. Maybe it is coming, just so you will know that you can still love." Isolde said nothing, but 3 weeks later, you heard she had moved into a small room at the edge of the village and started learning to sew. And 6 months after that, she invited you to her birth. The child, a girl named Elin, was born as gently as a spring breeze. No loud cries, no thrashing. But when you placed her in Isolde's arms, She wept, not the tears of pain or regret, but the tears of someone who has just found what she thought was lost faith in herself. Today, you are not visiting Isolde, but sitting under the Bodhi tree. You remember her. You remember Elin. And you remember not everyone begins with certainty. Some people step into motherhood with trembling hands and a heart full of scars. But they can still love, still hold their children, still move forward, if only there was someone who once sat in silence with them long enough for them to realize they do not have to carry everything alone. You open your eyes. The sky has turned pink. The birdsong is clearer, and the cool air slips into your collar like a greeting from the earth and sky. You stand, gently brush off your robes, and walk toward the meditation hall where the first babies of this year's spring will be born. And you know that no matter how many seasons pass, this work will never grow old. Because every child who arrives is different. Every mother is a new verse. And you are just the one who stitches together each breath, each cry, each moment of silence so that the world may continue. In gentleness, you leave the meditation hall as the morning mist begins to dissolve and the sun paints thin, pale yellow lines on the old roof tiles. Every tile has witnessed countless cries, laughs, and silent footsteps just like yours, the one who belongs to no particular place, yet is present wherever life begins. Today, you had planned to spend time organizing the wooden cabinet where you keep old supplies, yellowed cloths, a dented bronze basin, the bamboo tubes of ginger wine you used to carry on cold, windy nights. But your hand finds its way to a small box, tightly wrapped in cloth. Inside is something not many know. You possess a tarnished black iron chain with only a tiny sliver of turquoise at its center. It is all that remains of a mother from long ago whose real name you never knew. She arrived on a frigid winter night, her back hunched, her face bruised, her clothes tattered, carrying a child nearly full term in her womb. She didn't ask for help. She only asked to stay for one night, promising to leave before dawn. You didn't ask many questions. You just opened the temple gate, prepared a small bed, and heated some warm water. That night, she went into labor. Alone. No moans, no groans, just clenched teeth to maintain the silence. You weren't sure if it was a habit or a fear from her old life that had followed her to this peaceful place. The baby was born healthy, a boy. His dark eyes were wide open right after his first cry. She held her son, saying nothing, just held him very tightly, as if letting go for even a second would mean losing everything. The next morning, you woke early to cook porridge, but when you returned to the room, she was gone. On the empty bamboo bed, you found only that necklace, placed neatly beside the pillow, along with a small folded piece of paper. Thank you. Name him Kai. It means see. You never saw her again. But from that day on, you knew that some people pass through your life only once, yet leave a trace as distinct as a stone that silently alters the course of a river. You have kept that necklace all these years, not because of its material value, but because it represents the silent trust someone placed in you during their most vulnerable moment. Today, you hold the chain in your hand, feeling the cold of the metal, the roughness of the rust, and you know that somewhere, the boy named Kai may now be grown, perhaps living the life his mother once hoped for, or perhaps not. But either way, your presence in that moment became a part of his origin story. You place the necklace back in its box, wrap it carefully, and for the first time, right on the inside of the lid, trust does not need to be long. It only needs to be deep for one moment. That afternoon, you step out into the temple courtyard and sit on the stone steps, looking down at the valley. From there, you can see the rooftops peeking through the thin wisps of cooking smoke, the worn paths leading to the rice paddies, and in the distance, the dirt road you have walked back and forth countless times. Every path holds a story. Every mother, every child, every trembling hand that grasped yours, they have all become threads woven together in the invisible tapestry you have been making your whole life. And no two threads are alike, but they all point to one thing: life, whether brief or long, deserves to be welcomed with complete presence. You close your eyes, listening to the faint chime of the wind bell on the porch. No one is ringing it. The wind is barely there, but the sound is clear, as if the universe is nodding at you because you have kept your vow to always be present, for no reason other than compassion. The sky darkens faster than usual, as if the sun itself wants to retreat early, to make space for things deeper than light. You stand under the temple eaves, your fingers tracing the old, broken prayer beads, listening to the crickets begin their chorus from the back garden. The night's chill seeps into your collar, making you shiver slightly, but not from fear, from the feeling that tonight will be special. A villager had sent word earlier a young mother was in labor, but this time, something felt different. Not about her health or circumstances, but about a feeling. A vague premonition, as if tonight would be a final punctuation, a gentle conclusion to a cycle of your own. You pull on your cloak, grab your familiar cloth bag, and step out of the temple gate as you have done hundreds, thousands of times before. The road is dark, lit only by the small lantern you carry, its faint light brushing against the old tree trunks and ancient stones. Each footstep is a soft echo in your heart. It is time. It is time. The house sits on a gentle slope, its tiled roof covered in moss, kitchen smoke coiling up like a ribbon of incense in the night. When you step inside, the mother's eyes look up at you and you stop short. The girl you recognize her at once is Rowan. You delivered her for her mother nearly 30 years ago. Back then, Rowan was just a red-faced infant, wrapped in a coarse woolen blanket, her tiny hands with nails as soft as dew. You held her, lulled her to sleep when her mother was too weak after the birth. And now, she lies here, drenched in sweat, her eyes searching yours as if finding a face from a past life. Rowan says nothing. Neither do you. You just take her hand and begin to count her breaths. The same old rhythm you have taught to hundreds of mothers. Breathe in gently. Breathe out deeply. Stay rooted like a tree in a storm. You stay all night. No one relieves you. No apprentice follows you. There is only you, Rowan, the wind, and the contractions that roll in like waves on the shore. The moment the baby is born, you feel yourself grow still, not from exhaustion, nor from surprise, but because for the first time, you see the circle complete. You delivered this girl's mother. Now, you are delivering the girl herself, and the baby in your hands, a boy. His skin, as pink as a lotus petal in the rain, is the new beginning in that turning wheel. You place the baby in Rowan's arms. She weeps, not from pain, but from something deep within the knowledge that she has stepped through the same door as so many women before her. guided by the one who once guided her own mother, who is here now, waiting for her on the other side. You lean down and kiss the baby boy's forehead. Your own eyes blur, not from age, but because your heart is full. When everything is settled, you wash your hands, gather your things, and decline the offer to stay and rest. You want to go back to the temple, not because you need to rest, but because something is waiting for you there, something you need to face alone. On the way back, the moon rises high. Its light is brilliant as a blessing. The old path feels easier to walk than ever before, not because of your strength, but because you are no longer carrying a burden. You arrive at the temple, set your bag down by the door, unloop the broken prayer beads, and sit under the Bodhi tree, not to meditate, nor to think, just to breathe. And in that moment, amidst the night, the wind, and the faint, just right sound of the wind chime, you know this was the last time you will deliver a baby, not because you have no strength left, but because you have come full circle. From the one who didn't know what to do at the sound of the first cry, to the one who could sit silently in the midst of another's pain without being shaken, you are enough. No one needs to praise you. No name needs to be recorded. It is enough to know you were present, and you did not let a single soul be born in solitude. You smile. Your eyes close. A bell rings in your heart. No one strikes it. It doesn't need the wind. Now, you sit still. There are no more roads to walk tonight, and perhaps you don't need to walk anywhere else ever again. Your footsteps, in their own way, have stopped in the exact place they needed to be. The wind blows through the bamboo grove behind the temple. It is not a loud wind, but it is enough to stir the dry leaves still clinging to the branches. Those leaves once green, once soft, once glistening with dew are about to let go. But they do not fall in a hurry. They just sway, as if waiting for one last breath of the old season to fly away in peace. You sit there, your hands resting on your knees, your back against the familiar trunk of the Bodhi tree. Your heart beats slowly. Your breath is even. No anxiety, no regret. All that remains is the stillness of one who has seen too much birth, too much death, and has accepted that neither is a fault nor a fortune. A white cat walks across the courtyard, as light as smoke. It pays you no mind, nor does it need you to notice it. It simply shares this moment of presence with you, one being, one breath, one gentle footstep passing through the world. And in that very instant, you understand something very simple. You are not needed to deliver babies anymore. You are not needed to do anything more. Your presence, through all this time, has been enough. A single drop of dew falls on your hand, not cold, not unpleasantly wet, just a reminder, even in the night. Water finds a way to be present. You take a deep breath. Every child, every mother, every hurried arrival, and every time you didn't make it, they're all still there, in every vein, every dream, every breath you are about to carry into this sleep. A sleep not just for rest, but to continue living in the gentlest way possible, because you have lived enough with all the presence a single heart can give. You smile, very slowly. Your eyes close. And in that sleep, you no longer need a bell. For you, since when, you do not know, have become the bell itself. Next, we will follow in the footsteps of a wanderer, a beggar who owned nothing but a chipped wooden bowl, a pair of weary feet, and a heart free of resentment. No one knew his name. No one knew where he came from. Only that every village he passed through was left with unspoken questions about kindness, about giving, and about what makes a person truly rich. On a worn dirt path between two hills, where the wind whispered through bamboo groves and the moonlight sprinkled silver dust on every pebble, he was approaching the village gate. His straw sandals were worn nearly to the heel, each step heavy but unhurried. He paused when the wind shifted just to listen to the rustle of leaves, the croaking of frogs echoing from the distant rice paddies, and the sound of his own breath. You follow this beggar, standing behind him as he knocks 3 times on the large, rough-hewn wooden gate leading into Kantian village. The gate opens with the groan of rusted hinges. No one welcomes him, but he isn't sad, not surprised. He just bows slightly to the empty air. The evening air is a mix of wood ash, straw smoke, and the scent of rainwater settled on thatched roofs. Women washing vegetables by the well glance at him, then look away. A father hurriedly pulls his small child away. A puppy barks softly, then suddenly falls silent, as if it, too, senses something. The beggar asks for nothing. He just walks, and when he finds an old mango tree near the village center, on a patch of high ground less prone to mud, he sits down. No one invites him. No one stops him. The wind gently lifts the hem of his patched robe, revealing skin that is sun-darkened, thin but strong. Above, green mangoes sway. One falls near his feet. He picks it up, not to eat, but just to look at it. Everything ripens in its own time, he whispers. To whom it is unclear, perhaps to himself. A group of children approaches. Shy at first, then bolder. One scrunches up his face. "Mister, who are you?" But the old man only smiles, offering no reply. Then, from a distance, a familiar brown-robed figure appears. It is the village monk, walking toward them with a wary expression. But instead of shooing him away, the monk stops before him. The wind blows harder. From afar, the temple bell suddenly chimes, though no one knows who struck it. Perhaps. No one. Perhaps. Like the beggar's wooden bowl. The bell only rings when the time is right. The monk looks at the beggar with eyes both suspicious and curious. Those eyes had witnessed countless rainy seasons. Countless lives pass by. Yet they had never seen anyone like this old man, a person with nothing who radiated no sense of lack. Patched robes, bare feet, the wind etched into every line on his face. Yet no one would call him pitiful. Strangely, there was something about him that dared you not to pity him. The beggar simply bows his head slightly to the monk. Not a word, not a gesture of begging. The wooden bowl lies beside him, overturned, as if it had no need for anything. The children huddle behind the monk, whispering loudly. He talks to the mangoes, "Master." Another chimes in, "He isn't afraid of dogs or thunder." A tiny girl says softly, her voice like a wisp of wind. He smiles at the air. The monk remains silent, then turns and walks away. Not a word of dismissal, nor an invitation to the temple. The old man remains there, under the mango tree, as if he had lived there for generations. A short while later, a blind woman feels her way toward him. In her hand is a packet of rice wrapped in a banana leaf, which she offers with a trembling hand. "I cannot see you," she says, "but I can feel the gentleness in your breath." The old man takes the rice packet with both hands, then gently places it next to his still overturned bowl. He doesn't eat. He just nods. From a distance, a fishmonger sitting at her stall watches the scene and scoffs, giving rice and food to his kind. He has hands and feet, but chooses to wander. Such false piety. But the blind woman does not reply. She simply retreats, her face as serene as if she had never doubted a thing. Night falls. A light rain begins. The first drops tap on the thatched roofs like tiny bells. The villagers hurry home, closing their doors tightly. The wind carries the scent of damp earth, wet bamboo, and the harvest that has passed. The beggar remains seated. The rain soaks his robe, matting his hair like the gnarled roots of an old tree. But he does not shiver, nor does he seek shelter. He simply holds out his open palm, letting a single drop pool there before it falls slowly to the ground. When the rain grows heavier, he quietly stands, picks up his bowl, and begins to walk. Not toward anyone's home, nor toward the temple. He walks toward the edge of the village, where a small, long-forgotten shrine to an ancient tree god stands. The thatched roof is nearly collapsed, the earthen floor covered in moss. But there is just enough shelter for one person to sit out of the rain. He sits down under the rotting eaves, pulls an old cloth from his robe, gently wipes his bowl, and places it upside down before him. His eyes are half closed. The rain no longer matters. Inside the shrine, the wind whistles softly, like an old man telling stories to himself. Just then, a brown-robed figure appears at the shrine's entrance. It is the monk. Not out of concern, not out of curiosity, but because of an unanswered question. You ask for nothing. You take nothing. So what do you live on? The monk asks. The question echoes not as an interrogation, but as a confession. I do not understand. The beggar opens his eyes. His voice is as soft as kitchen smoke. I live on what is overlooked. The monk does not reply. The rain falls steadily, like a slow breath. An old leaf falls between them. Bowing his head, the monk asks softly, "Then, are you not afraid of hunger?" The beggar smiles a smile that isn't loud or bright, but lingers like the last chime of a bell at dusk. "I used to be afraid of hunger," he says, "until I realized hunger is just a sound. Don't eat it." The rain tapers off. Puddles on the ground become like dull mirrors, reflecting the silvery moon now rising from the bamboo grove to the east. The old shrine grows quiet, as if holding its breath to hear each drop of dew fall on the mossy branches. The monk remains seated beside the beggar, his hands clasped in his lap, his gaze fixed on the space before him, where the shadows of trees trembled as if breathing. That answer was more than just words. It was a small shattering, like a stone thrown into a still pond, sending out ripples that went on and on. "Don't eat it." The monk repeats in his mind. Perhaps for all these years, he had been eating too many false hungers, a hunger for praise, for authority, for recognition. And this man, who ate nothing, showed no signs of being hungry. The next morning, the village is abuzz. The beggar is no longer under the mango tree. In his place, there is only the old wooden bowl, overturned on a stone. No one dares touch it. But he hasn't gone far. He has chosen to rest in an abandoned hut behind the rice fields. a place the villagers often forget once the harvest is over. The roof is dilapidated, with holes in some places and covered in vines in others. He doesn't fix it, just clears a small patch of earth, lays down a few layers of dry leaves, and sits there, watching the sky. At noon, a group of people returning from the market pass by and see him sitting peacefully, his eyes half closed, hands on his knees, the wooden bowl beside him, now right side up, and empty. A woman at the front asks, half joking, half serious, "What have you got in your bowl, old man?" The beggar doesn't open his eyes. He replies softly, his voice like a breeze. Nothing, but enough for anyone who needs to see it. The words hang in the air for a few seconds, then drop into their hearts like a stone into a deep well. As evening falls, he walks along the edge of the fields, as slowly as if he were counting his own footsteps. At the end of the dirt path is an empty granary, where an old merchant is in a fit of rage. Sacks of rice in his storeroom have begun to mold after days of damp weather. His anger makes him smash a water jug, cursing his workers and himself. The beggar approaches, says nothing, doesn't stop. He just walks slowly past the anger, like wind passing through a doorway. The merchant shouts, "What are you doing here? Can't you see I'm furious?" The beggar smiles, then stoops to pick up a handful of fallen rice husks, blowing them into the wind. "Your anger is like this chaff if it can fly away. Let it. If you hold on to it, it will only choke your heart." Then he walks on, without waiting for a reply. That evening, a strong wind rises. The villagers tell each other to pull their belongings inside and shut their doors tight. But the beggar keeps walking through the village, his robe flapping like a torn kite, unhurried, unafraid. The children gather again to watch his figure recede, growing smaller and smaller, until it merges with the dusty twilight. An old woman sitting on her porch, her eyes as deep as a long-forgotten pond, sighs. Some people don't come to stay, but only to let us see ourselves reflected in their eyes. The next morning, he is seen again under the mango tree, this time picking up the bruised, fallen fruit that others have left behind. He chooses the ones that are not yet rotten, cuts away the spoiled parts, and places the edible pieces on a rock by the road, not for himself, but for anyone who might need them. A curious child asks, "Why don't you eat it all and be full?" He smiles. "If I eat it all, my stomach will be full, but if I leave it, my heart will be." One hot, listless afternoon, with the sun pouring down on the fields like thick honey, the village children decide to play by the small stream at the edge of the forest. They shout and splash, throwing stones that send up sprays of white foam. But their noise stops when a familiar figure appears at a bend in the path, the beggar, still empty-handed, still walking as lightly as a cloud, is heading toward them. The children fall silent, not out of fear, but curiosity. One of them calls out, "Mister, where did you go yesterday?" He doesn't answer. He just sits down by the stream, takes off his sandals, and dips his feet into the cool water. His hand traces patterns on the surface, as if writing stories that only the wind and the water can understand. After a moment, he takes from his robe a chipped earthenware bowl and a small bamboo stick. With a few deft movements, he begins to whittle the stick into a simple spoon. The children gather around, their eyes wide, following his every move. "What are you making?" one of them asks. He doesn't look up, only speaks slowly. "Making just enough to share. No more, no less." When the bamboo spoon is finished, he fills the bowl with stream water, scoops up a spoonful, and holds it up to eye level as if making an offering to the earth and sky. Then, instead of drinking, he gently tilts the spoon, letting the water fall back into the stream, drop by drop. The children are bewildered. One says, "What a waste." The beggar shakes his head, smiling. Not a single drop is wasted, only a mind that doesn't understand. That afternoon, he wanders into the village market, not to beg, not to buy, just to quietly observe. The market is packed with people for a rare goods trading day. The smells of dried fish, ripe fruit, incense, and dust mingle into an atmosphere that is both chaotic and alive. At a pottery stall, an old woman is arguing with the young vendor over a cracked bowl. She insists the price should be lower because it's flawed. The young man loses his temper and shoves her, causing her to fall backward. The beggar hurries to help her up, without a word of blame. When she is steady on her feet, he bends down, picks up the cracked bowl, and studies the fissure. "This cup can still hold water," he says with a smile. "You just can't fill it to the brim." His words make more than a few people nearby pause. An invisible man has suddenly become the center of attention without raising his voice. The young vendor, his face red, mumbles an apology to the old woman. After that, a few people in the market begin to watch him more closely. A woman selling beans asks, "Where are you from? Are you a Taoist master?" The beggar shakes his head. "I am only passing through. And if people see something in me, it is perhaps because they have forgotten they already have it within themselves." He leaves the market that day with 2 small papayas he was given. On his way back, he sees a thin dog waiting by the shrine. He stops, tears off a piece of ripe papaya, and offers it to the animal. The dog doesn't eat it right away, but lies down at his feet, breathing softly, like a comforted child. A moment later, the monk appears again, standing silently behind them, watching. "You have nothing, yet you keep giving?" the monk asks, this time not with suspicion, but as if questioning himself. The beggar replies without hesitation, "I do not give. I simply do not keep." The words fall like a timely rain into the cracks of the monk's heart. He clasps his hands, bows deeply, and sits down beside the beggar. He asks no more questions, says nothing more. The two sit quietly together as the sky turns the color of dusk. Their shadows lengthen and touch, like 2 roots meeting in the earth, without noise, without show, just silently connecting. Night descends like a thick blanket, covering the entire village. A crescent moon hangs in the sky, pale yellow, like a newly lit candle. A gentle wind slips through the cracks in the houses and the bamboo groves, carrying the murmur of insects like an ancient sutra that only those who listen deeply can understand. The beggar, once again, chooses the familiar mango tree as his resting place. But this time, he is not alone. A young woman holding a baby stands hesitantly at the edge of the path, clutching the sleeping infant in a thin blanket. Her eyes are full of indecision, wanting to approach but not daring to. "Sit," the beggar says softly, without turning his head. There is just enough wind here, and the ground is not too cold. The woman bows her head slightly and walks slowly toward him. She sits down, her gaze fixed on her child, her hand gently stroking its sweat-dampened hair. "I didn't come to ask for anything," she says. "I just didn't know where else to go." He doesn't answer right away. He just looks up at the dark canopy of the mango tree, where the unripe fruit sways like unanswered questions. "Where you go is not as important as who you go with," he says. "And if you have no one, then go with your own fear." The young woman begins to weep, silently. Her tears fall onto her child's cheek, as quiet as the night rain. "My husband left me when he found out I was pregnant," she whispers. "My mother-in-law threw me out of her house. I've wandered from village to village, and everyone turns away." The beggar still doesn't look at her, but his voice deepens like a distant temple drum. "This world has many who give money but withhold their gaze. And then there are others who, just by looking at you, can give you a home." She doesn't reply, but for the first time in many days, she looks up at him. In his eyes, there is no pity, no advice, only something like the surface of a still pond, calm and deep. She eventually falls asleep, her head resting on his shoulder, the baby still sleeping peacefully in her arms. He does not move. The night wind blows over the two figures, carrying the warmth of a presence that is strangely serene. The next morning, the woman awakens. Beside her, he is gone. There is only his old wooden bowl, and inside it, a ripe mango, a packet of cold rice, and a small bundle of coarse salt, all wrapped in a clean, brown cloth. She looks around, about to call out, but then stops. The baby is still asleep. The sun has just risen over the mountains, its light warming her still swollen cheeks. For the first time in months, she feels no need to go anywhere. At that same moment, the beggar is standing before the village temple gate. Empty-handed, bareheaded, his straw sandals nearly disintegrated. Before him is the monk wearing the same familiar brown robe, but with a different look in his eyes. The monk opens the gate without a word. The beggar steps inside. In the temple courtyard, white plumeria blossoms litter the path. A young novice sweeping the yard sees him and stops. "Master," he whispers. "Who is he?" The monk replies, "A man who was once nobody, and because of that, can now be found everywhere." The beggar bows his head before the Bodhi tree in the center of the courtyard. His feet leave faint marks on the dew-dampened tiles. He does not ask for shelter, nor for anything else. He simply places his wooden bowl at the foot of the Bodhi tree, gently turns it once, and then walks toward the back of the temple, where a small path leads out to the forest. The novice is bewildered. He's not going to eat. The monk smiles, placing a hand on the boy's head as if passing on an old wisdom. When the heart is full, one no longer needs anything else. And so, on that morning, the first breezes of summer begin to blow through the temple roof, carrying something both distant and very near, like the feeling you get when someone has been sleeping under the tree in your yard. But only after they've left do you realize they were ever there. A day passes after the beggar's quiet departure, but the atmosphere in the village seems to have changed. People don't speak of it directly, but their eyes search for something at every market corner, every field's edge, every small path, as if everyone carries an unasked question in their heart. On the road leading out of the village, he is walking slowly, the bowl hanging from his hip, the brown cloth draped over his shoulders, like the cloak of one who needs no shelter. On both sides of the road are rice paddies, now in season, as green and still as a lake. Occasionally, he stops to watch a dragonfly land on a blade of grass, smiling as if greeting an old friend. He comes to a small crossroads where an old, abandoned shrine stands in the middle of a field. The local people say the shrine is no longer sacred because no one lights incense there anymore. No god resides within. But when he steps inside, brushes the thin layer of dust from the altar, places his wooden bowl down, and sits cross-legged, the place becomes a sanctuary of astonishing stillness. That afternoon, a group of farmers passes by and sees him sitting silently in the abandoned shrine. One of them, curious, steps inside, scratching his head. "Mister, this place is haunted. Aren't you afraid?" The beggar opens his eyes, looks directly at the man, and says softly, like wind brushing over water, "Ghosts are the unrest in the hearts of the living. If my heart has no room for fear, what ghost can stay?" The men laugh, but as they walk away, none of them find the shrine so frightening anymore. An old woman begins sweeping the leaves around the altar. A child brings wildflowers to place there, and from that day on, the abandoned shrine is no longer abandoned. As night falls, he does not sleep inside the shrine, but lies on the stone steps outside, his face to the sky. An owl lands silently on a nearby branch and looks at him. "You don't need many words either," the beggar says to it. "Your presence is enough." The next day, he comes to a dry field where two men are arguing fiercely. One points at a ditch. "This water is mine. I dug it from my field. How dare you open the gate to let it flow here?" The other replies, "But my rice is dying of thirst. If I don't get water, I'll lose my whole crop." In the midst of the tension, the beggar walks over. He doesn't speak or intervene. He just sits down on the bank, takes his bowl, scoops water from the ditch, and slowly pours it over his own feet, washing away the road dust. The two men stop arguing and stare at him. "What are you doing?" they ask in unison. He wipes his feet and says, "Water doesn't know who is right. It only knows to flow to the lowest point." Silence envelops them. A moment later, the man who dug the ditch sighs. "Fine. I'll open the gate for one day. Tomorrow, you can pump me a barrel." The other man nods. They both leave, leaving him sitting there, his feet clean, but his bowl still empty. Yet in their hearts, they feel full. That afternoon, a sudden downpour begins. The beggar finds shelter under the eaves of a small house by the road. Inside, an old man lies bedridden, his breathing ragged, his family away. The beggar enters without asking, without introducing himself. He just gently wipes the sweat from the sick man's brow, changes the cool cloth, and sits beside him, taking his wrinkled, cold hand. A while later, the old man opens his eyes and murmurs, "Who are you?" The beggar replies, "A temporary guest, like the rain. I come. I cool things down for a moment, and then I leave. Will you come back?" The old man's voice trembles. "There's no need," he smiles. "You already have yourself." The rain stops. The sky is as clear as if it has just been washed. The beggar steps out of the house. No one sees him off, but the space he leaves behind seems to hold something that wasn't there before the silent presence of one who carried nothing but a full heart. The next morning, the sun rises like the yolk of an egg, breaking gently over the distant bamboo, its light spreading to gild every dewdrop on the leaves. The beggar continues his journey, his feet treading on the damp earth, leaving no lasting trace, but leaving something hard to name in the hearts of those he met. He passes a high clearing where a woman struggles to chop firewood in front of a rickety thatched hut. One of her arms is weak, the other trembles. Each time she swings the axe, the log slips and flies away. The beggar says nothing, just picks up the scattered logs, stacks them neatly, then takes the axe in his own two hands and splits them with a steady, slow rhythm, as if each chop were a meditative breath. She watches, speechless. When he is finished, he gathers all the wood into a bundle, places it by her door, and continues on his way, as if he had just done something as natural as drinking water or breathing out. The woman calls after him, her voice choked with emotion. "Mister, why don't you take anything?" He turns, his smile as gentle as the evening smoke. "I already have. I took the gift of being allowed to help." In the next village, he meets a middle-aged man sitting by the roadside, clutching a shattered ceramic jar, his face a mask of despair. He is an artisan, famous throughout the region for the unique patterns on his teapots, which no one else could replicate. "I worked for years to create this," the man says, his eyes never leaving the cracked jar. "I was careless, just for a second. Now, it's all ruined." The beggar sits down beside him, saying nothing. After a moment, he picks up a large piece of pottery, turning it in his hands as if examining a jewel. "This crack isn't ugly," he says. "It just shows where the most pressure was." The man frowns, "But it's not a jar anymore." "Perhaps," the beggar replies, "but perhaps now it is a mirror." The artisan falls silent. He looks at the jar again, no longer as a broken thing, but as an unfinished story. Something shifts in his eyes, like a person looking at a pile of ashes and realizing there are still embers within. On his way back to the forest's edge, the beggar passes a small lake. Its surface is as still as if no stone had ever been thrown. He stops at the water's edge and bends down to wash his face. A group of teenagers passes by and taunts him. "Look, the old man is checking his reflection to see if he's worth anything." The beggar doesn't reply. After washing his face, he looks into the water and nods. There is nothing of worth, but it is worthy of being known. One of the boys looks at him, hesitates, then asks, "So you're not angry at us?" The beggar shakes his head. "Anger is like a hot coal. If you throw it, you burn your hand. If you hold it, you burn your heart, and I have no hands to hold it forever." The group bursts out laughing, not because his words are funny, but because they are so undeniably true. That evening, he asks for shelter in the back room of an old tile-roofed house where an old man lives alone. The man is almost completely deaf, but when he sees the beggar, he doesn't chase him away, just waves him in and points to a kettle of boiling water. The beggar sits down and pours the tea, needing no invitation. The two of them sit quietly, drinking tea by the light of a flickering oil lamp. No one speaks, but in that silence, everything seems to be communicated. Each sip of hot tea touches the soul, as if to say, "I understand. I am here." Before sleeping, the beggar pulls a small piece of paper from his robe, writes something on it, and places it on the man's ancestral altar. No one knows what he wrote. Only the next morning, when the old man wakes and sees the paper. He clasps his hands and bows 3 times, and the beggar, as usual, was gone before the sun came up. A new day begins, and the beggar continues to walk, like the morning wind, whose origins and destination are unknown. Today's path leads him through a region of low hills, where fallen leaves litter the trail, and the cooing of doves echoes like distant chants. At the foot of the hills lies a small village with palm-thatched roofs, where the smoke from cooking fires always hangs in the air, even at dawn. At the village entrance is a rickety bamboo gate, and next to it, a wind chime made of seashells, a rare sight in this landlocked region. As he passes, the chimes tinkle softly, like an invitation. He stops, touches a shell, feeling its coolness, like spring water. A young boy from the village sees him, runs over, and tugs at his sleeve, his eyes sparkling. "You're the storyteller, right?" the child asks, looking up without blinking. "No," the beggar smiles. "I'm just the listener. The stories are already inside everyone." The boy thinks for a moment, then nods and takes his hand, leading him into the village. The scene is as simple as any other place he has been. An old woman spinning thread, a man washing vegetables at the well, children playing around the banyan tree. But here, he senses something different, a very deep silence, not of quietness, but of things left unsaid. As he passes the last house in the village, a teenager is sitting silently on the steps. His eyes are downcast, his arms wrapped around his knees, his expression as heavy as if he were carrying the sky. The beggar sits down beside him, without asking why. After a moment, the teenager speaks. "My father passed away last week. I'm the eldest son, but I can't cry. Everyone says I'm heartless." The beggar says nothing. He takes a single grain of rice from his robe, places it in the boy's palm, and says softly, "Rice doesn't cry when it enters the pot, but because of that, it nourishes others." The boy looks up, his eyes welling with tears. The words flow through him like a warm current. He doesn't know why, but for the first time in days, his chest feels lighter, as if he has just taken a deep breath. In the afternoon, walking along the edge of a field, he sees an older man struggling to push a cart loaded with dry bamboo through a muddy patch of road. He approaches, and without a word, places his hands on the cart and pushes with him. No one gives an order. No one asks for help. And the cart moves past the difficult spot. The man, panting, says, "Thank you. Why didn't you say anything?" The beggar just smiles, because the cart needed strength, not words. That whole evening, the villagers buzz with talk about the strange man. Some say he is a bodhisattva in disguise, others a monk in lay clothes. Some just shrug. He doesn't do anything, but you just feel lighter when he walks by. When the moon rises, the beggar leaves the village. He crosses the stream, where smooth stones lie still under the cool water. He takes off his sandals, steps in, and lets the water wash away the dust of the road. A frog hops past his foot. He bends down, looks at it, and whispers, "You jump because you fear me, but I didn't come to catch you." The wind rustles through the reeds, sounding like the swish of a robe against the earth. From far away, one can hear the faint tinkling of the seashell wind chime like a farewell. He continues on, his bowl swinging at his side, still empty, but with every step he leaves behind, the hearts of the people there become a little more full. One misty morning, when the fog obscures the paths and the trees seem to melt into the air, the beggar arrives in an unfamiliar land. The hills roll gently, and terraced fields glisten with mist like stairs leading to the heavens. The crowing of a rooster echoes in the thin air, its source unknown, a sound that is both a wake-up call and an echo from a dream. He passes through a bamboo gate, where a small, faded sign is carved, "Morning Market." But the market is still quiet. Stalls are covered with cloths. Vendors are just starting their fires. And only a single old woman with a stooped back is washing vegetables by a water barrel. Her hands moving as slowly as if she were cleansing the past. The beggar sits down beside her, scoops up some water, and washes his bowl without a word. After a moment, the old woman turns to him. "Where are you from? You look like you've walked out of a fairy tale." He smiles faintly. "I come from the place where questions don't need answers." The old woman chuckles. "Then you must be from inside my own head. I have plenty of questions like that." Soon, the market awakens. People begin to display their goods. Some sell tofu. Some sell pickled vegetables. Others lay out brocade fabrics or hang cages of singing birds. The sounds spread gently, like the prelude to an unwritten symphony. The beggar just walks around, asking for nothing, taking nothing. But wherever he goes, the merchants suddenly find themselves smiling, as if reminded of something they hadn't thought of in a very long time. In the middle of the market is a man selling masks, all kinds: clown masks, demon masks, saint masks, even a mask with no eyes, only a smiling mouth. Seeing the old man approach, he holds out a black wooden mask. "Try this one. It suits you." The beggar takes it, but doesn't put it on. He just looks at it, his fingers tracing the worn carvings. "A beautiful mask," he says, "but I'm afraid if I wore it too long, I'd forget who I was before I put it on." The seller laughs. "Sometimes that's for the best. Life is less tiring that way." The beggar shakes his head and sets the mask down. It's not tiring to be yourself. It's only tiring to try to be someone else. The mask seller stops laughing. He stands silently, watching the beggar's figure disappear behind the stalls, his gaze seemingly turned inward. Leaving the market, the beggar follows a red dirt path up a hill. At the top is a small monastery, its walls whitewashed, its faded red tiles muted by time, its wooden gate ajar. He stands before the gate for a long time, not knocking, not calling out. After a while, the gate swings open on its own, pushed by no one. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe the silence had seeped into the hinges. Inside the monastery, a young nun is sweeping the courtyard. She stops when she sees him enter, her hand still gripping the broom, her eyes wide as if she's encountered something from a dream, though she can't quite place the face. "Who are you?" she asks, tightening her grip. "I am someone who once had nothing, and now it's still the same," he replies. She invites him to sit on a stone bench by the lotus pond. The lotus leaves are withered, the flowers gone. Only a few dry seed pods remain. But he isn't sad. He says, "A withered flower is also beautiful because it is real. An artificial flower stays fresh forever, but no one remembers its scent." She smiles softly. My master used to say that, but you are the first person to make me understand it. She brews tea from dried leaves in the kitchen and offers it to him. The two sit by the old lotus pond, drinking hot tea in the thin mist. No one says anything more. No one needs to. Before leaving the monastery, he places his bowl under a newly planted Bodhi sapling and bows his head. "Allow me to leave this emptiness here," he says, "for this place knows how to care for what no one sees." The nun clasps her hands, not daring to keep him, but in her eyes, there's something like a promise that from this day on, when she sweeps the courtyard, she won't just be sweeping leaves. The next morning, the wind shifts over the distant mountains. Clouds roll down like white rivers, flooding the valleys, making the whole landscape feel as if it's submerged in a quiet dream. The beggar does not return to the monastery, nor does he stop in the old village. He follows a winding path around the foot of the mountain, a trail few people use, rugged and full of loose stones. But for him, each step seems to be a meditation. On this path, he comes across a man sitting with his head in his hands by a large rock, his clothes dirty, his shoulders shaking as if trying to swallow his sobs. He doesn't see the old man approach, but when the beggar's shadow falls over him, he speaks without preamble. "I've just lost everything." The beggar sits down next to him, not asking why or what. He just waits. After a while, the man tells his story. "My family lost everything in a house fire. I thought I was strong, but now I have nothing left to stand on." The beggar picks up a small pebble from the path and places it in the man's palm. "This is all you have now," he says. "It is light, it is small, but it is a place to start." The man clutches the pebble as if it were the most precious thing in the world, not because of its value, but because of the flicker of belief it has just ignited that losing everything is not the end. The two sit for a while longer in silence. When the beggar stands to leave, he says only one thing. "I have lost things, too. But because of that, my hands are now free to help others stand up." At noon, he arrives at a wide meadow where a single ancient tree stands alone, its canopy spreading like a giant umbrella. Under its shade, a young woman is playing a pipa. The music drifts far, sad but not tragic, like a mother's lullaby for a child about to be born. She stops playing when she sees him approach. "Would you like to hear a cheerful tune?" she asks. He sits down, clasps his hands, and smiles. "Play a tune that is neither happy nor sad, just like the wind." The woman thinks for a moment, then plucks a few scattered notes. The music is not high or low, not rushed or sparse. It is a sound that flows past the ears without getting stuck. But strangely, the heart feels lighter. When she finishes, she asks, "Did you hear anything?" He replies, "I heard the space between the notes. That is where silence lives." She bows her head and smiles. "I never thought of it that way. Because people usually listen with their ears," he says. "But today, you listened with your heart." In the evening, he stops by a house on the edge of the forest where a paralyzed old woman lives alone with her old dog. She lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, sighing all day because no one ever visits. When the beggar enters, she looks at him as if seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" she asks. "I am the one you have been waiting for, but did not know who it was." She laughs. "Well then, sit down and tell me a story that isn't like every other day." The beggar sits by her bed and tells her about an ant carrying a grain of rice across a desert, about a leaf that fell into a fish's mouth and was carried all over the lake, and about a cloud that lost its way, but because of that, brought rain to a dry land. She laughs, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. Every day I wait for someone to make me forget I'm slowly dying. Today, you made me feel alive again. Before he leaves, he pours her a cup of water and places his hand on her forehead in a gentle farewell. There is no ceremony, no chanting, just a complete and total presence. That night, he sleeps under the ancient tree where the pipa player had sat. The moon is as full as a paper lantern hanging in the sky, illuminating every fold of his robe, every steady breath of the sleeping beggar. The wind glides by like a hand stroking his silver hair. And on that night, perhaps the whole forest sleeps peacefully with him. Just as the sky begins to lighten, a thin mist still clinging to the wild grass around the ancient tree, the beggar stretches, takes a deep breath, and slowly steps out from the tree's shadow. There is no hurry, no clear destination. Yet he walks as if the place he is going has been waiting for him for a very long time. The dirt path leads him into a small valley, where houses made of clay are built into the mountainside like seashells clinging to a cliff. The residents here make their living by growing tea. Rows of lush green tea plants cover the slopes, emitting a cool, earthy fragrance on the morning breeze. At the entrance to the village, a group of children are playing hopscotch, their squares drawn with charcoal. When they see the beggar, one of them shouts, "Mister, is your bowl still empty?" He smiles. "If it were full, how could I hold your smile?" They burst out laughing and return to their game. One of them even presses a smooth white pebble into his hand. "This is for you, so that when no one smiles at you, you'll still have something beautiful to look at." He closes his hand around the pebble, his heart warmed by a light that does not come from the sun. In the village, the adults are busy with the tea harvest. Bundles of leaves are cut, dried, and then roasted in large cast iron woks. The aroma is everywhere. The beggar is offered a warm bowl of tea by a young woman with a sun-darkened face, but eyes as clear as the village well water. "This is a precious tea," she says, "only for special guests." He accepts the bowl, takes a sip, and replies, "The taste of the tea is not in the leaf, but in the heart of the one who offers it." The girl falls silent, her hand still holding the tray, as if wanting to memorize every word. Afternoon, he wanders up to the higher hills, where an old man lives alone in a small hut. The man is sitting on a tattered mat, his hands weaving small pieces of bamboo into the shape of a crane. "I make them for my grandchildren who have gone far away," he says. "They don't come back, but I still make enough for them." The beggar sits down and watches him work. After a while, he also picks up some bamboo and learns to weave. "If your hands tremble, let the wind guide them," he says. "A bird doesn't need us to push it to fly, only that we don't grip it too tightly." The old man nods, his eyes glistening. "Perhaps today is the first time in many years that I haven't been weaving alone." In the evening, a woman from the village invites him to her home for a meal. She lives with her elderly, bedridden father. During the meal, the beggar says little, only listening as the father speaks of his past as a village teacher, of the students he taught, and of the years that will never return. Before leaving, the beggar takes the old father's hand and whispers, "You are still teaching, not with words, but with patience." When he steps out of the house, the sun is low in the sky. A streak of red cloud hangs across the horizon like a brushstroke of ink on an unwritten page. The wind carries the scent of cooled tea, the old fragrance of a day gone by. He stops by the village well and looks at his reflection in the clear water. Gray hair, tanned skin, eyes still deep but not clouded, and the wooden bowl still empty. But then someone, a young boy, passing by, suddenly stops and drops a freshly picked tea blossom into it. "For you," the boy says, "so that when you are sad, you will know this village remembers you." The beggar says nothing. He just looks at the blossom in his bowl, which is opened slightly, like a soft whisper from the earth. That night, he sleeps on the porch of an old temple on the hillside. No one invites him, and no one forbids him. The moon rises high. The distant sound of a temple bell seems to echo from a past life, and the wind blows like a mother's hand gently stroking the forehead of a child drifting off to sleep. As morning broke, dewdrops still sparkled on the mossy roof tiles of the old temple where the beggar had rested. He sat up, stretching like a branch, budding in spring, and clasped his hands before the statue of Guan Yin in the courtyard. The statue was worn by wind and rain, but its compassionate gaze looked down, unchanged. He whispered something, not in words, but as if sending a thought on the wind for it to carry. The temple's novice stepped out from the back, a bamboo broom still in hand, and froze when he saw the man. His eyes held a mix of surprise, respect, and a faint familiarity, as if he had seen him in a dream. You were here all night?" the novice asked. "No," the beggar replied softly. "I was only sitting in the earth's dream." The novice smiled shyly and invited him in for tea. In the small room, the scent of incense lingered. An old wooden table, a cracked porcelain cup, pale green tea. Everything was simple to the point of perfection. The abbot entered, his hair almost completely white, his smile as serene as a stream flowing around stones. "Sir," the abbot said, "you ask for nothing, yet everywhere you go, people leave something for you. What do you do with all that you carry?" The beggar bowed his head, gently turning the empty bowl in his hands. "I carry what people don't keep: forgotten kindness, an unintentional smile, a silence that was never heard." The abbot nodded. "Then you are a mendicant of the formless," the beggar replied. "Formless, but very heavy, because no one sees it, no one can help carry it." After tea, he left the temple, taking nothing, only leaving behind the dried tea blossom from the day before, placing it beside the Guan Yin statue. On his way down the mountain, he passed a village square where a group of young men were arguing heatedly. One man gestured wildly, "I did more work, so why is the share equal?" Another shot back, "No one counts every drop of sweat. We're a team." The beggar did not intervene. He simply sat down by a large rock, took out his bowl, placed it in his palm, and dropped a small pebble into it. Clink. They all turned to look. He dropped a second pebble. Clink. One of them asked, "What are you doing?" "I am measuring the sound of the human heart," he replied. "The louder it is, the emptier the echo." The group fell silent. A moment later, the man who had been shouting bowed his head. "All right, I'm sorry." The dispute ended without another argument. All it took was a bowl and 2 clinks enough to show that silence, at the right moment, can be louder than 1,000 words. As evening approached, he came to a wooden bridge crossing a stream. In the middle of the bridge stood a little girl, holding a broken branch, her eyes fixed on the water as if sending it a message. He stopped beside her. "What are you doing, little one?" he asked. "I'm throwing my wish into the stream," she said. "My mother says if the stream carries it away, it will reach the sky god." He sat down, watching the water flow. "Does the sky god ever answer?" The girl shook her head sadly. "No, but I still do it. Maybe today will be the first time." The beggar held out his bowl for her to see inside empty, except for a sliver of reflected sunlight. "What do you see in here?" "Nothing." "That is where a wish begins. From the empty place." The girl smiled. The broken branch was dropped into the stream and floated away lazily, like an unwritten story. As she ran home, the beggar remained on the bridge a while longer, watching the sunlight play on the water, shimmering like the flame of a small dream. When the sun set, he left the bridge and continued down the narrow dirt path leading west. Another night was coming, and another village would receive the shadow of a man who had nothing, yet carried all the precious things that daily life forgets. Night fell upon the western hills like a heavy blanket, cradling all the earth's sighs. The beggar stopped under a bamboo thicket by the road, where moonlight filtered through the leaves, creating shimmering patches of light like fallen stars. He built no shelter, lit no fire. He just spread his robe, lay on his side, and held the wooden bowl to his chest like someone keeping a formless, silent promise. In a drifting dream, he found he was no longer walking. He was sitting on an ancient stone step, surrounded by faceless people. They were silent, but he could hear their voices echoes in his heart. "We used to not give for fear of losing. But you lost everything, so you would have nothing left to hold." The next morning, he awoke to the sound of a distant temple bell. Faint but resolute, a reminder a new day had come. He continued his journey into a more barren land. Here, the sun was harsh, the earth was cracked, and the wind carried red dust instead of the scent of grass. The people here lived quietly, spoke little, their smiles as rare as groundwater. When he set foot in the village, no one shooed him away, but no one invited him in. He was used to it. He knew some places only open their hearts when you don't try to force your way in. He sat down by a dry stone well in the village center, looking down into its stony, empty depths. A child watched him from a distance, hesitated, then approached. "Don't you know it's dry here?" the child asked. "I know." He nodded. "But the human heart can draw water even from the driest places." The child frowned. "With what? By not waiting for water to draw, but by drawing with your hands and giving it to another's heart." The answer left the child stunned. Then he ran off without another word. That afternoon, the entire village was surprised to see that same child carrying bucket after bucket of water from a stream more than 3 miles away. Not to drink, but just to wet the bottom of the well where the old man was sitting. To cool his spot, the boy said, even if he said he didn't need it. The adults heard this and fell silent. Without a word to each other, one by one, they began to bring water, not enough to fill the well, but enough for them to see they could still share the smallest things. That night, he was invited into the home of an old herbalist. In the small room, cluttered with medicinal leaves and clay jars, he listened to the ragged breathing of a man who had saved countless lives, but could not now save himself from old age and weakness. "Do you have any medicine for me?" the herbalist asked, with a bitter smile. The beggar placed his wooden bowl on the table and opened it for the old man to see inside empty. "Yes, the medicine is here." "Nothingness as medicine." The old man laughed weakly. "Because you are already full." The beggar said, "Now you only need to learn how to become lighter." The herbalist closed his eyes and nodded. The next morning, he left the village in silence. No one saw him off, but in the heart of each person, the image of him sitting by the dry well, with his empty bowl and his undemanding eyes, remained etched like a seal. On his way, he met a group of men hauling logs from the forest. A large log was wedged between two rocks. They used levers and brute force, but it wouldn't budge. He walked over, said nothing, and simply placed his hand on the adjacent rock, pushing gently in the opposite direction. Suddenly, the log slid free. The men were astonished. One asked, "How did you know that direction?" "Because sometimes, to pull something heavy, you must know how to push something small," he replied. The group fell silent, not knowing what to say. He walked on, his steps light, but the hearts of those who witnessed him felt heavy with a gratitude, with something that could not be named, but had taken root in their hearts. That evening, he sat at the edge of a pine forest, listening to the insects strumming in the darkness. The moon peeked through the leaves. He placed his bowl before him and closed his eyes. There was nothing in it, but he heard a strange sound, an echo from within his own heart. Not words, not a sound, just a presence, empty and full. The sky had not yet fully brightened. A thin mist drifted over the grass like a milky blanket drawn lightly over the earth. The beggar slowly opened his eyes after a night spent at the edge of the forest. His hands still cradled the wooden bowl as if guarding a secret that never needed to be told. Today was the last day of a journey he had walked for many seasons. Though he did not count, his heart knew there are cycles in life that need no calendar, only a bird changing its course, a wind shifting its direction, or the light changing its tone. The path today led him to a low hill, where a small village lay nestled between a pine forest and a field of white cotton. The air here carried the cool scent of sun-dried linen and freshly sawn wood. The villagers made their living by weaving. Every house had a loom, its rhythmic clatter like a steady rain in the sunshine. When he entered the village, no one treated him like a stranger. An older man, fixing a roof, nodded a greeting. A woman, hanging cloth in her yard, gently invited him over for a sip of tea. No one asked who he was, because in their eyes, it seemed they had been waiting for him for a long time. He sat on the porch of an old woman who was weaving. She worked by hand, her threads as silver as clouds. With each pass of the shuttle, she let out a long, even, soft breath, as if she were weaving not just cloth, but memory itself. "What are you weaving?" he asked. She didn't look at him, still weaving. "I am weaving my last cloth to line my own coffin?" He nodded. "I am weaving, too, but my cloth is made of things no one sees." She stopped her hands and looked at him for the first time. "What do you weave with?" He held up his bowl and turned it upside down on the ground. "With what others leave behind," she smiled, then handed him a piece of unsewn white cloth. "Take this, so that if anyone asks where you came from, you can say, 'I came from this cloth, never painted, never torn.'" He took it, folded it carefully, and placed it inside his bowl. That afternoon, the beggar walked up the hill behind the village. At the top stood an ancient tree, its trunk bent like the stooped back of a mother waiting for her child to return. Under the tree was an old grave, marked not by a stone, but by a circle of rocks. He sat down there, as if he had arrived at the place he was meant to be. A young woman from the village passed by, saw him, and stopped. She was carrying a small bundle of firewood and a rice cake wrapped in a banana leaf. "Do you need anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "I have enough." "You don't want anything." He smiled. "I want, but I do not need. Some things are only beautiful when we don't hold them." The girl placed the cake down beside him, then clasped her hands in a farewell without asking anything more. When it was completely dark, he looked up at the sky, where the full moon was like an open, unjudging eye. The wind blew through the old tree, its leaves rustling like the sound of cloth. He turned his wooden bowl upside down in front of him, placed his hands on his knees, let out a very long breath, and closed his eyes. They say the night was very still, without a single dog's bark, without a single gust of wind. There was only a very distant sound, like a bell ringing from a place no one knew. The next morning, the villagers went up the hill. They found him still sitting there, his back straight, his eyes closed, as if sleeping. Before him was the overturned bowl. Inside was a piece of unembroidered white cloth and a smooth, polished pebble. No one called out. No one shook him. They just sat down around him, as if each had lived a different life and had now returned to sit by his side. The child came close, opened the bowl, looked inside, then looked up and said, "He didn't leave anything. But why do I feel so full?" That afternoon, they held no funeral. They just took scraps of cloth, tangled threads, and pebbles from the roadside, folded them into the shape of flowers, and placed them around where he sat. The wooden bowl remained overturned. No one turned it up, because they knew if they did, they would only see themselves inside it. The days passed. The nights came. But the spot under the tree on the hilltop, where the beggar had sat, was no longer an empty place. People began to go there, not to cry, not to light incense, but to sit, just to sit, as he once had. A mother brought her young child and laid him on a flat stone next to the overturned bowl. "He cried all night," she said softly. "But whenever we come here, he falls right to sleep." She said nothing more, just sat quietly, her eyes on the fields in the distance, where the white cotton now bloomed like a thin layer of frost. An old man, with a bent back and trembling hands, climbed the slope slowly to reach the bowl. He sat down and took a small jade stone from his pocket, a gift from his son, before he left and never returned. He placed the jade inside the wooden bowl and whispered, "He doesn't need jade anymore. My son needs light, and that light, you left it behind. Gradually, inside the overturned wooden bowl, small offerings were placed: a feather, a round stone, a half-finished piece of embroidery, a short, dry twig that smelled of sandalwood. No one fought over the space. No one took anything away. The bowl remained empty, yet everyone saw in it the things they had forgotten: stillness, kindness, the lack of need for a reason. One day, the monk from the distant temple at the foot of the mountain, the one who had met him on a rainy afternoon years ago, also came. He wore no robes, carried no ritual objects, only his eyes, which now understood many things. He sat down by the bowl, touched it lightly, and said, "Some people spend their whole lives trying to fill a bowl, but you used emptiness to fill the world." Not long after, the villagers built a circle of stones around the spot. They didn't call it a grave. They didn't call it a shrine. They called it the sitting place. And anyone with a weary heart could come and sit. No need to pray. No need to wish. Just sit. The old came to forget old pains. The young came to listen to the leaves. The far-flung traveler came to take a full, unhurried breath. And then they would leave. No one took anything with them. No one needed to keep anything. On a morning as ordinary as any other, a boy who had just turned 12, with bright eyes, tousled hair, and a heart full of questions, was brought to the sitting place by his mother. He looked at the overturned bowl under the tree and wondered, "Mother, what's inside it?" His mother smiled, sat down, and pulled him into her embrace. It's where everything that cannot be held by hand is kept, but can be carried in the heart. The boy was silent. Then he stood up, took a glass marble from his pocket, his most prized possession at that moment. He placed it beside the bowl, touched the wood lightly, and said a simple sentence: "For you, because you didn't ask." At that moment, the wind blew harder than usual. The leaves of the tree rained down around the bowl, as if nodding, as if laughing, as if clapping without a sound. The sun rose higher, but was not glaring. The day brightened, but was not too sharp. And if you looked very closely, you could see a thin sliver of sunlit dust glide over the lip of the bowl, as light as the final breath of a man who never needed anyone to know he had lived. In order to give, you find yourself now in your own space. Your body is relaxed. Your heartbeat is slowing down. And within you, perhaps the image of that wooden bowl is appearing empty, yet full. There was nothing extraordinary about the beggar. He had no magic, no fame, no sermons, but he was present, and in every moment, he quietly reminded the world that what matters isn't what you hold in your hand, but what you leave in the hearts of others. Perhaps you are tired. Perhaps you, too, feel empty. But sometimes, it is this very emptiness that makes you light. Light enough to listen, light enough to love, light enough to let go. Imagine yourself now, sitting beneath that tree. The air is cool. The wind is steady. You are undisturbed. There is only you, your breath, and a peace that no one can take away. Allow everything you've carried throughout the day, the thoughts, the worries, the responsibilities, to be placed in that bowl. No reason is needed. No need to sort them out. Just set them down. And the bowl. It will hold them for you. Gently. Without judgment. You deserve to rest, not because you had done enough, but simply because you are human, and human beings, in their own beautiful way, need to be held. Sleep deeply tonight, like the beggar once slept beneath the mango tree, like the earth sleeps in the wind, like the wooden bowl, silent, yet ever giving. That bowl is you, always empty, always enough. Next story, we will walk beneath a soft rain, where petals drift down in an old peach garden in the Chinese countryside. A cool wind slips gently through branches laden with moisture, and each raindrop, like a breath from the sky, falls to the fragrant, damp earth. On this ground, a farmer walks slowly, his old straw sandals limp with each step. Every footfall is a soft squish, like a whisper from the earth as it receives what is already gone. You walk with him through the thin mist, as each blossom falls like an unspoken farewell. He does not hurry to gather them, nor does he mourn their passing. Over many years, he has learned that not everything beautiful is meant to be kept. Some things are only meant to be watched, to be breathed with, and then to be let go. His small house is tucked behind a low, moss-covered stone wall. The wall is not high enough to keep anyone out, only to suggest that this is a space of stillness. Each time the rain comes, the old peach tree in the yard releases its faded blossoms, letting them fall into the channels of rainwater, as if the heavens themselves were making an offering to impermanence. You stop with him at the base of the tree. Under the soft soil, the roots are a network of unspoken things, habits, joys, and pains that have passed. The farmer extends his hand, catching a single falling petal. It is cold, thin, and nearly dissolves in his palm. But he does not clench his fist. He simply looks at it for a moment, then lets the wind carry it away. In a corner of the yard, bamboo baskets filled with medicinal roots are stacked neatly. Each basket bears the marks of time. Some are worn, others have a few broken slats. He sits on a low wooden stool, leaning against the wall, and gazes out at the rain-slicked courtyard. From here, he can see every small movement, a leaf twirling slowly in the air, a drop of water gathering at the tip of a branch before falling heavily onto a leaf below with a sound like a quiet sigh. You can almost hear his thoughts, though he says nothing. In truth, for many years now, he has not needed to say much. Words, to him, are like the morning mist. They exist, but they can never be held. A stray cat, gray-furred and drenched, emerges from a patch of grass behind the chicken coop and tucks itself under the wooden eaves. The farmer watches it. He doesn't call to it or invite it in. He simply allows it to be, just as the rain is soothing the earth. Everything has its place, without needing to jostle for it. This is the first lesson you learn from the farmer, to neither cling to anything nor hastily push anything away. Amid the steady drumming of the rain, he silently rises and walks toward the oldest peach tree. This one once bore the most beautiful blossoms, but it is also the weakest. With every rainy season, more of its dry branches fall. He does not cut them away. Each time one falls, it is a release, he once thought, then quietly continued watering its roots as if no loss had occurred. You wonder if a dead branch is cared for in this way. Then what is the measure of a life's worth? The question needs no answer, for the rain itself replies with a gentle patter on the thatched roof. In the back of the garden, where few people look, a row of plum trees is blooming late. Their petals are smaller, whiter, and when they fall, they tend to cling to the soft grass. He bends down, gathers a few, and gently places them in your palm. He says nothing, but you understand. These are not flowers to be kept, but to remind you that all beauty was once a passing moment. As the evening deepens, he lights an oil lamp. The light is not strong, just enough to see the raindrops falling slowly past the bamboo curtain, the soft purr of the cat, the patter of rain on leaves, the sigh of wind through the wooden door frame. They all merge into a wordless melody that only those who are truly still can hear in its entirety. Finally, he turns to you. He does not ask, does not explain. He simply places a pot of freshly brewed tea on the small bamboo table. You lift the cup to your lips. The tea is warm. The taste is slightly bitter, like the rain itself. But after the bitterness comes a strange, settling calm, as if you have just had a conversation with yourself, merely by sitting in silence with this farmer. And so, the first night of rain ends, not with a conclusion, but with a lingering silence, where you understand that every falling petal carries a message. If only you are willing to stop and listen. The rain continued into the second day. No longer a downpour, but softer, like a thin veil embroidered across the sky. In the morning, you open your eyes in the farmer's simple wooden house. A chill makes you pull your shoulders in. But the scent of last night's tea still lingers, a memory not yet faded. Outside, the peach blossoms are still falling, slower, lighter, and this time, they do not seem to fall alone. The farmer has been awake since before dawn. You see him in the distance, hunched over a patch of weeds at the base of the stone wall. In his hand is a small bamboo basket. His lips are silent, his feet moving across the earth as if afraid to harm the fallen leaves beneath them. In the basket are the peach petals he gathered yesterday, still holding their shape, though their color has faded. You go out and sit with him by the plum tree, where the eaves still hold a few lingering raindrops, not yet ready to fall. He hands you an old notebook. Its leather cover is peeling at the edges. The paper yellowed and slightly damp in the corners. My father's, he says softly. He wrote when there was no one left to talk to. On the first page, you see a line of scrawled characters. The wind can make the peach blossom fall, but it cannot carry away the idea of the flower. It is unclear if it's a recorded verse or a private reflection, but you know at once this is no ordinary diary. Flipping through the pages, you find the writing is sparse, not ordered by date. Sometimes there are only a few lines. Other times, a long passage describes a rainstorm that flooded the entire vegetable garden. But strangely, there is no complaint. Every mention of loss is followed by a mention of something blooming, a new sprout emerging after the storm, the first chirp of a sparrow after a long night, or a dream of his wife walking barefoot in the yard. The farmer sits there, holding the clay teapot, pouring tea into 2 small cups. He says nothing more, as if the notebook has said everything necessary. You set it down on the table, your eyes still fixed on the last sentence you read. What remains after all has crumbled is, perhaps, our very self. A gust of wind sends the petals in the basket scattering into the air. Instead of stopping them, he sits perfectly still, watching them. For a moment, you see on his face the release of something very old. You ask, why gather the fallen petals only to let them go again. He gives a small smile, his eyes never leaving the petals as they drift back down, because I need to know that I still have it in me to let them fly. You think about that line all the way to the old storage shed behind the garden. It holds baskets, hose, shovels, and even some chipped ceramic pots. On a high shelf sits a small wooden box, tied with dried grass. He takes it down, opens the lid, and pulls out several thin sheets of paper, on which are haikus written by his father. One, in particular, stays with you. Wind pushes the blossom, branch still, the earth is silent. Who says that it falls? The poem is as light as the wind, but it touches something within you. Is it true that every time we see a petal fall, we assign it a story, a sadness, an ending? But for this farmer, it is just a process without a beginning or an end, simply a change of form. He takes out another basket, this one for the roots he dug up yesterday morning. You help him wash them in a trough of rainwater. The water is ice cold on your hands, but the fragrance that rises is as gentle as the earth after a rain. He uses a bamboo brush to gently scrub each root, leaving no trace of dirt, as if caring for a small, living creature. They must be clean before they return to the earth, he says, not for anyone's sake, simply because they deserve to be clean. And you understand that no act is small when done with complete presence. Washing the roots, like watching the petals fall, is a chance to live slowly, to feel fully and without rush. In the afternoon, as the rain lets up, he lays the roots out to dry in the faint sunlight. You sit on the steps, watching the sunbeams pierce the clouds still hanging over the distant mountains. The scene is as still as an unfinished ink wash painting, where every line breathes with the sky and the earth. You close your eyes, letting your breath move like the clouds. In your mind, the voice of your own thoughts has quieted. All that remains is the sound of falling petals, and strangely, they are not sad at all. The sky is brightening. The rain has stopped, but the air is still heavy with moisture, as if the earth is not yet ready to exhale all it has absorbed over the last 3 days. The steady drip of water from the thatched roof sounds like the gentle, steady beat of a calm heart. You wake earlier than usual, hearing the wind rustle through the bamboo grove behind the house like an invitation for a walk. The farmer is already in the garden. You see him sitting under the small awning next to the tea shed, a simple shelter just big enough for two. He is looking through an old book, its pages blurred by water, its spine broken and held together with a piece of twine. On the cover, a faded inscription reads, "Precepts, concentration, wisdom from my father." You sit down beside him. He hands you the book without a word. You open to a random page. Inside, there are no complicated teachings, only small notes, sometimes just a single line. To let go is not to abandon, but to return something to its truth. On the next page, a longer entry recounts a past Ulambana festival, when his father offered wine and steamed buns to the spirits who had no one to make offerings for them. He wrote, "I do not know who will come to eat, but I know this act makes my own heart full." You suddenly remember something that seemed meaningless every evening when the farmer washes his baskets. He cleans the handles too, even though they never touch the dirt. Yesterday, you had asked him why, and he just smiled. "Because my hands touch them." Now, you understand? A soft knock comes from the bamboo gate. A stranger is standing there, soaked to the bone, wearing a faded coat of coarse cloth and carrying an old fabric bag. The farmer rises, unsurprised, and simply beckons him in. "It's raining elsewhere again," he says, as if they have known each other for years. The stranger doesn't say much, just bows his head in greeting and sits on the woven mat. The farmer places the teapot on a small charcoal stove and prepares tea, just as he has done so many times before. In the small tea hut, the scent of charcoal, fresh tea, and smoke mingle, creating a space that is both warm and strangely silent. The stranger pulls a soft, wrinkled persimmon from his bag and places it on the mat. You think it's a gift, but he just stares at it for a long time before asking, "Have you ever eaten a rotten persimmon?" You are taken aback, but the farmer just smiles and nods gently. "Yes, once. I was angry at the time." The stranger nods, as if listening to a verse. "When I ate the rotten persimmon, I finally knew what sweetness was." No one asks anything more. The three of you sit in silence. The persimmon lies there, a witness to what no one needs to say. The stranger then takes a piece of twine from his bag, ties it into a loop, and hangs the persimmon from the roof of the hut, where the light hits it just enough to reveal the cracks in its skin. You don't know why, but the act makes you want to cry. Not out of pity, but from the realization that some things, which have no value in the eyes of the world, still carry a layer of truth that only a silent heart can see. The stranger spends the night in the shed behind the garden. You see him lay a bamboo mat on the earthen floor, using a dry cloth bag as a pillow. He doesn't lock the door. "The wind will keep watch for me," he says, before closing his eyes. Night falls. You lie on the bamboo cot, your eyes open, looking at the thatched roof and listening to the soft wind through the cracks. The dripping from the eaves is still steady, and that persimmon, suspended between light and shadow, seems to breathe with the rhythm of the earth. You ask yourself in your own life, how many rotten persimmons have you thrown away before you learned to see them with new eyes? Perhaps today, in this rain-soaked garden, a lesson has arrived, not through words, but through silence, not through reason, but through a rotten persimmon. And just like that, you fall asleep, not because you are tired, but because your heart no longer feels the need to hold anything up. The next morning opens with sunlight as thin as silk thread, stretched across the roof tiles and filtering through the still damp leaves of the peach trees. There is no more rain, but the ground is soft. The air carries the scent of moist roots, and the wind brings a strange fragrance, the smell of earth after it has finished telling a story. You wake up as the farmer is searching for an old bamboo basket. He is preparing to go to the small stream at the end of the garden to wash the root baskets, and you decide to go with him. The grass is still soaked, your straw sandals making a soft sound, but you don't feel uncomfortable. There is something inviting about this morning, an invitation to live slowly, to observe closely, and to be present. Along the path to the stream, there are rows of wild, pale yellow chrysanthemums, low to the ground and planted by no one. They don't need anyone to remember their name, he says, walking past them. They still bloom every year. When you arrive, you see the clear water flowing over a bed of pebbles. The farmer kneels, places the basket in the current, and begins washing the roots with his bare hands. There is no rush. Each movement seems carefully considered, yet effortless. He scrubs each piece of root, letting the water carry away the dirt, then looks up at you. Want to try? You kneel beside him, take a root, and begin to scrub it with your hands. The cold water makes your fingers a little numb, but the sensation is surprisingly pleasant. It is unlike any work you have ever done. There is no goal, no deadline, no sense of urgency. There is only you, the root, the water, and the sound of birds chirping from the high branches in the distance. When you scrub the root, he says, don't think about cleaning the root. Don't think about working. Just be the hands, the water, and the movement. You don't fully understand, but you don't ask, because a part of you already understands. Without needing words, a little while later, he lifts the basket, shakes it gently to drain the water, and places it on a large rock by the bank. The two of you sit there, watching the stream flow. He begins to tell a story. Long ago, his father once said, "If you ever find yourself bothered by dirty water, remember that the dirty water keeps flowing, while you are the one who often stands still. You are silent. The words echo in your mind like the sound of the stream. The dirty water keeps flowing, while you are the one who often stands still." He continues, telling of a time he was angry with a friend who had betrayed him in business. He was so angry he couldn't sleep for many nights. Every time it rained, he would think of the old story. But then one day, while washing a basket just like this, he suddenly realized that friend had long since moved on. Yet here he was, still holding on to the dirt in his heart. From that day on, he says, I wasn't just washing the baskets, I was washing myself. His words make you pause. How many times have you thought you were preserving a memory, when in fact, you were just holding on to mud? He stands up, stretching. Let's go. The sun is up. The tea is waiting. On the way back, you notice a small, overgrown path leading into the forest. He sees you looking and smiles. That path leads to the bamboo grove. It's where my father used to meditate. You ask, "Do you still sit there?" He shakes his head. There's no need anymore. When washing a basket is the same as meditating, then everywhere is a meditation hall. That sentence follows you all the way back. It feels as if every step, every gesture you make from now on could become a meditation if you are present, if you just stop. That evening, he brings the sun-dried roots inside and arranges each type into a separate jar. You sit quietly by the window, watching the neat rows of clay jars, like an archive of nameless lessons. Outside, the peach blossoms fall again. Not in a rush, not tragically, just a few petals, falling like a gentle gesture, a reminder that everything continues, whether you notice or not. And you, finally, can only sit still, listening to the sound of yourself returning. The next afternoon, as the sunlight began to paint the tree trunks and roof tiles with the color of honey, a soft knock sounded at the bamboo gate. Not the sound of someone in a hurry. Just 3 knocks, enough to make the farmer look up from the step where he was stripping dried leaves from a bundle of herbs. You heard it too, and slowly followed him to open the gate. Standing there was the stranger from the day before, still in the same faded coarse cloth, but this time dry and cleaner. On his back was a new cloth bag, slung to the side, so light it seemed empty. The stranger bowed his head once more and, without waiting for an invitation, stepped into the yard as if he had lived there for a long time. The farmer didn't ask why he had returned. He just nodded and gestured toward the tea hut. You poured the water. Today's tea was brewed from sweetgrass and a pinch of young ginger. The liquid was amber-colored, warm, and had a heart-softening aroma. After a few sips of tea, the stranger slowly pulled a small, round wooden object from his bag, a bell. It wasn't large, but it was heavy in the hand. The shape was simple, without any patterns, just a faint inscription carved near the base, found without seeking. You gently touch it. The metal is cool. The sound, when it rings softly, is not sharp, but seems to emanate from the earth itself. The stranger placed it in the center of the mat and said, "This bell is from an old monastery on the mountain. When they closed down, I asked to keep it." You ask, "Who does it call?" The stranger smiled, his eyes crinkling. "No one. It's just so the one ringing it knows they are still breathing." The space fell silent for a long time after that. The sound of a falling leaf touching the ground was clearer than any human voice. The farmer quietly stood up, went to get some rice and black beans, and began to cook porridge in a clay pot hanging over the wood fire. While waiting for it to boil, he told a story of a year when the harvest failed. The drought was severe that year. The peach trees didn't blossom. The rice in the jar was nearly gone. I was alone, and the whole garden felt dead. Every morning, I would look at the bare branches, and my heart felt as dry as the earth. You ask. Then what? He gestured to the pot. Then I made porridge. Every day, a little rice, a lot of water, and I invited the wind to eat with me. You let out a soft laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so heart-wrenchingly sad. He didn't deny his lack. He invited it in, poured it water, and sat down to eat with it, as if it were an old friend. And just like that, he continued. I was no longer afraid of it. I was poor, but my belly could still be warm. Listening to him, you feel your own heart soften like the last ray of sunlight slipping off the thatched roof. Perhaps the hardest thing is not to overcome suffering, but to learn to sit and eat with it without resentment. The stranger had been listening the whole time, occasionally nodding. When the porridge was ready, the farmer ladled out 3 bowls, placing one next to the wooden bell. No one said anything about it, but you knew that was the wind's portion. The meal passed gently. The porridge was simple, just rice, black beans, a little salt, and a slice of ginger. But how could it be so warming to the soul? Perhaps because no one among the 3 of them felt the need to say anything. And it was this very lack of need that made the story sink so deep. After the meal, the stranger stood up, bowed, and left this time without his bag. The wooden bell remained, resting on a bamboo stool by the door. When the stranger's figure disappeared behind the bamboo grove, the farmer turned to you and said softly, "Some people come to give, not to receive." You sat quietly beside the bell. You tried ringing it once. The sound filled the air, then slowly faded, but its echo remained in your heart like a reminder. You are still breathing. You are still here, outside. The peach blossoms began to fall again. This time, you no longer saw them as falling. They were simply continuing their journey like the wooden bell, like the stranger, like yourself. That night, you slept in a silence born not from a lack of sound, but from a heart that was no longer in turmoil. Outside, the rain returned, this time a short shower, as if to gently water a soul that had just been opened. You listened to it, no longer sad, no longer resisting, just listening, as if the rain itself were a verse being recited in the open air. When morning came, the sunlight reflected in shimmering drops on the peach leaves and the damp stone steps. The farmer was sitting in the middle of the yard, and in front of him was a small clay jar with a large crack down its side. You approached, about to ask if he needed a new one, but he shook his head. "I will mend it." He took a lump of beeswax and a scrap of silk, then slowly began to heat the jar over a small wood fire. "There is no need to replace what can still be held," he said, his hand steadily dabbing wax into the crack. "It is no longer whole, but it is still itself." You sat down beside him, feeling the warmth from the fire seep into your hands and feet. In the low-roofed kitchen, smoke drifted up gently, mingling the scent of beeswax and ash into a strangely familiar smell. The clay jar was turned slowly, each crack filled with patience. "Once," he recounted, "my father dropped my mother's favorite teacup. My mother wasn't angry. She gathered every piece and spent 3 nights gluing it back together with tree resin. When she was finished, she placed it on the ancestral altar and never used it again. She said, 'It is a lesson now, not an object.'" You looked at the mended jar and realized that everything that has ever been broken can become something more. Not by returning to how it was, but by becoming a testament to someone who chose to preserve rather than discard. After he was finished, he took the jar out to the yard, rinsed it with rainwater, and then placed it back in its old spot, a corner by the bamboo wall, where he kept a few dry branches, like a private shrine to the earth. You didn't ask why. Some things don't need to be explained. They only need to be done with full presence. That afternoon, the sky turned overcast again. A light wind blew through the peach branches, carrying a few darkened petals. You and he went to gather the dry branches broken by the storm. Each one was placed in a bundle, not thrown hastily. He said he would use them to start fires on later days. They are still useful. They are just no longer on the tree. As you cleared a corner of the garden, you discovered a small peach sapling growing precariously between 2 stone slabs. It wasn't tall. Its trunk was slender, and its leaves had just begun to unfurl. But you saw in it a powerful will. "I once wanted to pull it up," he said. "I thought it was growing in the wrong place, but then I left it, and it lived." You knelt beside the tree. Its roots had clung tightly to the cracks in the stone. It would not be easily broken. Despite the rain, the wind, the harsh sun, this tree had chosen to stay and grow. You saw yourself in it, in a way you couldn't yet name. He continued, "I used to think you had to plant trees in good soil, but trees also choose their soil, and sometimes the soil knows to yield its goodness to the one who dares to remain." In the evening, he sharpened an old knife, preparing to split the dead peach branches. Each time the blade touched the wood, he whispered something, like an apology. When you asked, he just smiled. A dry branch also once blossomed. You helped gather the branches and start a fire. The flames rose quickly, the crackling sound like the whisper of wood telling its final story. There was something warm but also poignant about it. You felt your eyes sting, and not from the smoke. As night fell, and all the work was done, he lit a small oil lamp and placed it next to the mended jar. Light can also pass through the cracks, he said, and sometimes it is the cracks that let us see the light. You sat watching the flickering lamplight, wondering if something within you had ever broken. Would you have the gentleness to mend it as he had? You didn't need the answer right now. It was enough to know that in a garden of wind and rain, someone had chosen not to throw away what was broken. And in doing so, he had taught you how to live. Night descended in near absolute silence. You lay on the bamboo cot, your eyes fixed on the low ceiling, where a few faint beams from the oil lamp swept gently across the bamboo slats. The sound of rain was gone, replaced by the chirping of insects, a simple melody for those who know how to sit still and listen. You dreamed. But it was not the chaotic dream you were used to. In the dream, you were standing in the peach garden, but this time, the trees could speak. Not with words, but with feeling. The old tree tilted its head, a branch lowering to your shoulder as if to ask, "Have you seen yet?" You didn't answer, but in your heart, you knew perhaps for the first time in your life that you had seen something. Not an image, not an event, just an awareness, a deep breath from the very bottom of yourself, as if an unnamed knot that had existed for so long had finally been untied. When you awoke, it was still dark, but not black. It was the pale blue light that appears only for a few brief moments before dawn. The farmer was already awake. He was starting a fire in the yard, next to the small earthen stove. Warmth rose in coils, and above it, the old clay kettle was boiling. You walked over and sat beside him. He didn't look, just placed a cup next to you and said, "Did you dream?" You nodded. The peach tree spoke. He smiled. "When my father passed, I had the same dream." The tree said nothing, but I knew. When the mind is still, dreams are also a way of listening to life. He poured the tea, its ginger fragrance mingling with the warm scent of ash from the fire. You took a sip and found it strange how could tea taste so much like a breath. He gazed into the fire and recounted how his father once said, "Not every tree needs someone to pick its fruit. Some trees live only to shed their leaves." You suddenly remembered the story of the mended jar. Perhaps every crack is a way of learning to sit with oneself, without hoping someone will come to fix it. Maybe the crack doesn't need to be healed, it just needs to be seen. After the tea was finished, he took out a neatly folded piece of paper and placed it in your palm. "This is a verse my father wrote when he no longer had the strength to garden," he said. He knew then that he was about to leave. You unfolded it. The ink was faded, but still legible. The bird does not ask where the wind blows. The leaf does not fear falling from the branch. One who knows how to see needs not to hold. One who knows how to let go already has everything. You read it again, and a third time. With each reading, your vision blurred. Not exactly from emotion, but from a hard-to-name tenderness, the feeling of seeing yourself in the image of someone who came before, who touched the same worries, the same confusion, but then chose to gently move on. He stood up and walked toward the garden. You followed. The trees were still dim in the mist, but today they seemed taller, fuller, stronger. The ground was still covered with fallen petals, but you no longer saw them as a sign of separation. They were like unsent letters that had already been read in silence. He stopped before a broken peach branch. He didn't throw it away. He didn't tie it back. He just quietly took a piece of dried banana fiber and tied the broken branch to the main trunk. Not too tightly. It may not live, but it deserves a chance, he said. We don't heal it to force it to live, only so it is not alone in its trying. You looked at the coarse fiber tied around the branch and thought of all the things in you that had ever cracked, ever broken. Perhaps you, too, did not need to be completely healed. Just a gentle tie, a bit of presence, someone who knew how to sit beside you. By noon, it was drizzling again. You and he sat inside the tea hut, looking out at the yard. This rain didn't make anyone wet. It was just enough to wash the dust from the leaves, to make the flowers fall a little faster, and to make one want to sit still for a little longer. You closed your eyes, listening to the rain touch the roof, listening to the soft hum of the teapot, listening to yourself breathe. Never before had your breath been so clear. That afternoon, the wind changed direction. It was no longer the damp wind carrying the smell of wet earth, but a light, dry breeze bearing the scent of new grass emerging after the long rain. You and the farmer sat on the porch, in a yard of water-streaked bricks, drying your straw sandals and drinking warm tea. Beside you was the empty basket you had used that morning to gather the branches broken by the storm. After a while, he stood up, went inside, and returned with an old ceramic vase, the kind with a tall neck. Its glaze cracked, the color a pale ash from years of firing. He placed the vase on the mat and then handed you a piece of old twine. "Tie this," he said, "with your left hand." You were a little surprised, but did as he asked. The twine wasn't very long, and the vase was nothing special. Yet, the moment you began to tie it, the feeling immediately changed. Your left hand was clumsy, unaccustomed to precise work. Every time you tightened the twine, it slipped. He didn't intervene, just watched and smiled. Finally, you finished. The knot wasn't secure. The twine was slightly askew, but it held the vase. He nodded. "Good. Now untie it, and do it again with your right hand." You did. It was much easier, of course. The knot was tight, the twine perfectly placed, as if you had done it 100 times. He looked closely, then said, "You see, the left hand teaches us patience. The right hand teaches us skill. Both are our teachers." You sat there, the twine still in your hand, and suddenly realized you had always trusted what was easy, fast, and familiar. But sometimes, it is clumsiness that offers the chance to see clearly where you are. He told you that when he was young, he used to make pottery, not because he liked it, but because his father made him learn. He hated the craft. His hands were always caked with clay, his fingernails worn down by the grit. But one day, while turning the potter's wheel, a lump of clay collapsed right in the middle. He was so frustrated he almost threw it away. But his father just said, "The clay collapsed because your hands were stronger than your heart." Those words made him stop, not because the clay had collapsed, but because his father had spoken so gently that his words carried no judgment. From that day on, he said, I learned to turn the wheel in silence, not to design, not to force it into my own idea. I let the clay choose its form. You thought about your own life. How many times had you tried to mold something into shape, a relationship, a plan, a dream? And how many times, when it collapsed, did you assume it was someone else's fault or the circumstances? But maybe it was just that your hands were stronger than your heart. After tea, he led you to the back of the garden to a row of small earthen jars used for pickling greens. But today was not for pickling. He wanted to teach you something else. Each jar had a lid. He removed one and pointed inside, empty, clean, and cool. "What do you think this jar is for?" he asked. "You guessed. Greens, water, rice." He shook his head. "No, it contains emptiness." You smiled. He continued, "Without the empty space, it cannot hold anything. Without the void, fullness is meaningless. People are the same. We are always seeking to be filled with knowledge, achievements, images, but we forget to create the space." You sat down next to the jar, looked into its empty belly, and suddenly felt your own heart open up to a quiet space. It had no name, no purpose. It was just empty, but so alive. In the evening, he taught you how to wrap a bundle of lotus tea. The lotus leaves were dry and crisp, the petals already dried in a wicker basket. The way he wrapped it was not commercial, not rushed, not tightly packed. He just took each petal, layered it between the tea leaves, and then wrapped it all in coarse paper. You asked, "Is this a gift for someone?" He smiled. "For no one. But one day, someone will need it." You held the tea bundle in your hands, feeling its warmth and fragrance. An object not yet needed, but prepared with the utmost care. Just like you, perhaps not yet sure where you were going, but also being prepared gently, without any rush. Outside, the wind returned. Peach blossoms fell softly onto the damp earth. You could no longer distinguish between an end and a beginning. Everything was in motion, without needing a name. And you, for the first time, felt no need to understand. The wind changed direction again. Not the restless wind that brings a storm, but the wind of mid-season quiet, steady, carrying the long breath of the changing earth. The morning was crystal clear, with no sound of rain, only the distant call of a bird and the final drops of water from the roof tiles. You woke up before the light had fully flooded the yard. The farmer was standing at the edge of the garden, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the mountains were a faint blur behind the mist. In his hand, he held a dry peach branch that had broken the day before. He didn't rush to throw it away, nor did he do anything with it. He just stood, observing, as if the branch were recounting something he once knew, but had forgotten. You walked closer. He handed you the branch and said, "You think it's dead, don't you?" You nodded, taking the dry branch, feeling the lightness of what once held life. "Once," he said, "I was like this too, standing in the middle of life, but with a heart as dry as this branch." He didn't elaborate. That was all. Then he turned back toward the porch, where the old bamboo stool was waiting. You followed, carrying the dry branch with you. The wind picked up unexpectedly, but it wasn't cold. On the contrary, it seemed to stir a layer of dust in your memory. He looked up at the sky and said, "Every wind comes from a cause, but not to destroy. The wind comes to test what is truly rooted." Before you could ask, he went inside and brought out an old wind chime, its strings rotted. "This one," he said. I hung up when my mother passed. At night, when the wind rang it, I used to think it was her calling. You helped him retie the strings and hang the chime by the kitchen door. When the wind blew through, it made a very fine, very real sound, not the kind that startles, but the kind that seeps into the soul, like the soft breath of someone who hasn't spoken in a long time. He watched the chime, saying nothing more. After a moment, he stood up and walked to the end of the garden, where a low stone ledge crossed a ditch. On the ledge was a small bronze basin, turned green with age. You sat down beside him as he began to wash his face with the rainwater collected in the basin. "Sometimes," he said, "the wind doesn't come to make us cold, but to wash away what we cannot see." Those words left you speechless. Spontaneously, you bent down, cupped some water from the basin, and splashed it on your face. The water was cold, bone-chillingly cold, but afterward came a strange sensation, as if you had just put yourself back where you were meant to be. Later, when you returned to the house, he handed you an old cloth tunic. "Put this on. The wind will be back." You smiled and took it. The tunic was light, smelling of old fabric, but it felt so familiar, like being held by someone without a word being said. That afternoon, it didn't rain, but gray clouds still drifted lazily overhead. He took a bamboo plank, set it up as a low platform, and then placed small stones of various shapes on it. You sat down with him, curious. He smiled. "I used to arrange stones to understand my own heart. You didn't understand. But when you started to do the same, choosing a stone, placing it down, then adding another, you saw the truth. It wasn't easy to maintain balance. Each stone had its own angles, and if you placed one wrong, the whole structure would collapse, just like the human heart. It can't be just right or wrong, only a fit or not a fit at that particular moment." He slowly built a small tower, then took it apart, then rebuilt it, then took it apart again. You asked, "Why not leave it?" He replied, "Because each time I take it apart, I see what wasn't right before. And that is how I learned not to hold on to what is no longer fitting." You sat there, arranging and dismantling. No more frustration, no more trying to make it perfect. Simply being present. With each collapse of the stones, you could clearly hear something inside you also letting go. As it began to get dark, he gathered the stones, washed them, and put them in a basket. They will be used again tomorrow, but they don't have to be the same as today. That night, the wind rose stronger. The wind chime rang in deep, long tones. You lay on the bamboo bed, your hands still remembering the feel of the stone, the water, the old cloth tunic. And for the first time, you whispered a sentence that needed no voice. Everything happens for a reason. Even the wind. It rained again near dawn, a short and silent shower, like a whisper sent down just before the morning opened its eyes. You awoke to the sound of drops pattering from the thatched roof onto the stone yard. The strong wind from yesterday was gone. There was only that steady, familiar sound, like the long breath of the earth releasing its memories. You put on the old cloth tunic from the day before and went out to the porch. The farmer was already there, sitting silently before the small bamboo table with a brush and a thin sheet of paper. It seemed like nothing special until you got closer and realized he was writing. Not a verse, nor a letter to anyone. just a letter, but with no recipient named. His characters were even, slow, and deliberate, as if each stroke were a thread stitching together something that had been broken. You didn't dare to ask, just sat beside him, listening to the soft scrape of the brush on paper, mingling with the sound of the rain outside. The air was so fresh you felt your own thoughts begin to clear. After a while, he folded the letter, didn't put it in an envelope, just placed it gently between the pages of an old book. You looked at him, not needing to ask, but he still smiled and said, "I'm writing to my wife, even though she has been gone a long time." His voice held no sadness. On the contrary, it was very light, like someone who had just set down a burden carried through a long, rainy season. "There are things I never said when she was alive, but not saying them doesn't mean they don't need to be said. You pondered something you had never considered before, that perhaps words don't have to arrive at the right time. Sometimes they need to arrive when the heart is quiet enough to speak them, not to be heard in return, but for one's own self to understand." He told you that for the first year after his wife passed, he wrote nothing. No letters, no diary, not a single line. "I was afraid that if I wrote it down, the pain would become more real. But then one afternoon, just like this one, as the rain fell softly on the roof, he sat down and wrote the first line. Today, the peaches are blooming again." From then on, he no longer tried to forget, nor did he try to hold on. Every year, on the anniversary of her passing, he would write a new letter, never sent, never burned, never locked away, just slipped between the pages of a book and left for time to carry away. You suddenly thought of all the things you had wanted to say to someone, maybe to someone who was gone, maybe to an old part of yourself, and perhaps you too needed to write such a letter, not to send, but to understand. That afternoon, he gave you a new notebook. The paper was still white, the leather cover not yet aged. "For you," he said, "write when your heart cannot speak with your mouth." You took the notebook, feeling as if you were receiving a mirror, not to see your face, but to see your heart when no one was looking. When the rain stopped, the two of you went out to the back garden, where a few young plum trees were budding. He pointed to a low branch where a small sparrow's nest had once been. Last year, they built their nest there, but then a storm came. The nest fell, and the eggs broke. You looked down at the ground. Nothing remained but a little green moss and damp earth. But he continued, "This morning, I saw a little sparrow land there again. It might have been one of the hatchlings from last year's eggs. You looked up. The tree wasn't tall. The branch wasn't strong. But the bird still chose to return. Not because it was safer, but perhaps because it just needed a place that once belonged to something precious. When you returned, he ladled out a bowl of white rice and placed it next to an empty bowl. You asked, 'Is no one eating?' He replied, 'It's to remember the one who can no longer eat.' You asked no more questions. You just looked at the empty bowl and felt your own heart become full. That night, he sat and wrote another letter. Not for his wife, but for himself. You didn't read it, but you knew that in it were things he had never spoken aloud and never needed to speak to anyone else other than the person who had lived long enough to see that what is left unsaid is sometimes the most important thing to say. The next day, the sky was a deep, cloudless blue. as if every drop of water in the heavens had been washed clean by the previous day's rain. The early sun cut through the leaves, falling onto the damp brick yard in bright patches, like a pattern sprinkled randomly by a meditating artist. The farmer was in the yard early, holding a broom made of bamboo branches and twine. You followed him out. Seeing he wasn't sweeping the house or the yard, he was sweeping around the base of a small plum tree. There were no fallen leaves, no trash, just earth. But still, he swept. "This," he said, "seeing your gaze is for sweeping the mind, not the dirt." You didn't reply. You just bent down, picked up another broom leaning against the bamboo fence, and began to sweep along with him. Your hands were not used to it. The ground was hard and uneven. Every pull of the broom caught or went astray. But you kept at it. "Don't try to force it to be clean," he said softly. "Just be present in each movement." You relaxed your grip a little, and strangely, everything became lighter. You no longer forced the broom to follow a straight path. You let it move, like a breath, like a stream of thought. And just like that, the ground seemed to smooth out, and your mind began to quiet. After a while, he put the broom down, sat right on the ground, and leaned against the tree trunk. He stroked the roots that surfaced from the earth as if touching something familiar. You sat beside him, and before you could ask anything, he began to speak. "Long ago, my father used to say, weeds can grow anywhere, but a plum tree must choose its soil. So, if you ever find you are not blossoming, it may not be because you are lacking, but because the soil is not right." You were silent. The words were a comfort you didn't know you needed. How many times had you blamed yourself for not blooming on time? How many times had you watched others flourish in their lives while you were fumbling for light in a long winter? Perhaps it was true. Sometimes it's not the seed's fault. He pointed to a small plum sprout hidden beneath the grass. "This one was trampled last year. I thought it was dead, but it survived." You looked at it. Its stem was thin, its leaves still wrinkled, but its roots were firm. All the signs showed it had been hurt, but you didn't feel pity. You felt respect. "People are the same," he said. "You don't have to be big. You just have to keep growing." That noon, as the sun reached its peak, you returned to the house with him. The meal was simple: cold rice, salt-braised beans, and a little boiled bamboo shoot with soy sauce. But strangely, you had never tasted cold rice so delicious. Maybe it was the air. Maybe it was because your heart had made room to receive it. After lunch, he led you to another corner of the garden where a grove of young bamboo grew near an earthen bank. The bamboo was short, not yet a thicket, with just a few stalks as tall as a man, still green and soft. He bent down, placed his hand on one stalk, and said, "You see, bamboo doesn't fear the wind because it knows how to bend." You stood there, your hand also on the bamboo. It felt smooth, but very strong. Unlike large timber trees, bamboo was small, flexible, yet durable. "Once," he said, "I saw a storm fell the peach and the jackfruit trees, but the bamboo was still standing, not because it was strong, but because it didn't try to stand still." You understood. You thought of yourself. How many times had you fallen? Because you tried to hold your position, tried to be right, to be good, to be rigid, when all you needed to do was know how to bend. He told you that when he was a child, Every time he cried, his mother wouldn't soothe him with words. She would just lead him to the bamboo grove, sit beside him, and say, "Listen to the wind in it." And he would stop crying, not because he was no longer sad, but because the wind could say what people could not. That afternoon, you sat under the bamboo grove for 2 hours, not thinking, not needing to solve anything, just sitting, listening to the bamboo bend with the wind, listening to your heart bend with the bamboo. When you stood up, you were no longer the person you were that morning. The next morning, you woke up earlier than usual, not because any sound had awakened you, but because something inside called you to wake. It was a feeling like being a child, opening your eyes in the middle of a rainy night and finding yourself wrapped in a warm blanket next to your mother. No reason to be awake, but still awake, knowing that the moment was worth living fully. You stepped out into the yard. The sky was not yet bright, and a light mist still hung over the stone steps and the peach petals that had fallen overnight. Everything was covered in a soft gray light, as if the entire garden were whispering in a light sleep. The farmer was there, holding a bundle of grass. He walked slowly toward the small chicken coop at the end of the yard. You followed, and just a few steps later, you heard the clucking of chickens waking up, stretching their wings lazily as if they too had just emerged from a dream. He opened the coop door and spread the dry grass on the floor, unhurried, without a word. The chickens didn't push or shove. They just stepped out quietly, one by one. They walked in the pale light of dawn like little monks entering a meditation hall. "They teach me many things," he said. "Every morning, they are never in a hurry. They don't fight over food. They don't rush to eat. They just step out and stand for a moment." You watched a hen standing perfectly still, her head held high, her eyes on the sky. She was doing nothing, but you could feel a deep presence in her posture, as if she were meditating. After feeding the chickens, he led you to the vegetable patches. The soil was still damp from the rain 2 days ago. The greens were lush. The smell of new grass and fresh earth cleared your mind. His hand gently turned over the base of each small vegetable, checking not with suspicion, but with love. "You know," he said, "the vegetables don't live because I care for them. They live because the conditions have come together. I only create the conditions. I am not the one who gives life." You bent down to pull some weeds from around the base of a cabbage. They grew intertwined, but not meaninglessly. Some weeds. He left. "This kind is good for the soil," he said. "If you pull them all out, the vegetables will have no friends." You laughed. "Vegetables need friends." He nodded. "Just like people. Not all friends are pleasant, but without them, the ground becomes barren." After gardening, he filled a bucket with water, brought it out to the yard, and began to wash the stones placed around the base of the peach tree. You found it strange. "Why wash the stones?" He looked at you and smiled gently. "Because today, I want to see them more clearly." You helped him. The stones weren't dirty, but when the water poured over them, every vein and pattern became clear. Some were round as eggs, others sharp-edged. Each one had its own feeling. "They are like people," he said. "When they are dry, everyone looks the same. But when there is water, when there are emotions, you see what is truly inside." That afternoon, the sun was mild. The two of you sat on the porch steps drinking tea. The The tea he brewed today was made with sweetgrass and a few pieces of dried orange peel. The aroma was clean, the taste gentle, like a spoken embrace. You looked out at the garden. The wind stirred gently, and petals fell one by one. Each fall was unique. No two paths were the same, like every thought you had ever had, like every sorrow that had passed. He followed your gaze and told a story. Once, when I was little, I was angry with my mother, not because she did anything wrong, just because I felt she didn't understand me. So I refused to eat, ran away to the back of the garden, and sat by the peach tree. It started to rain. I was cold, but I refused to go inside. He waited. He was silent for a moment, then continued. My mother didn't come looking for me. She just placed a bowl of rice at the base of the tree and went back inside. I ate it. I said nothing. But from that day on, I knew love doesn't have to be loud. You felt a lump in your throat. Not because of the story, but because you realized there had been loves in your life that existed just like that. Silent, undemanding, not needing to be understood. As evening fell, the moon rose behind the roof, full, bright, and silent. You and he sat under the moonlight, with a small wooden tray on which a few clean stones he had just washed were placed. He took one and put it in your palm. Keep this. When you find yourself forgetting someone, hold it. You don't have to do anything. Just hold it. You gently closed your hand around the stone. It wasn't cool. It wasn't warm. It just had a real weight. Like a feeling that had once been yours, now resting peacefully. And when you slept, you dreamed you were laying stones around a peach tree blooming in the wind. Each stone was something that had once caused you pain. And each falling petal was a word of forgiveness. You woke up while the sky was still a dim gray, just entering the pale light of dawn. The bamboo house was as quiet as a long breath held overnight. Outside, there was no sound of rain, no sound of wind, only the silence of the earth and sky preparing for a new day. You stepped out into the yard and found the farmer sitting before the small altar next to the earthen stove. On the altar was an empty bowl. No rice, no flowers, no incense. Just a clean, round, empty ceramic bowl. He sat silently, his hands gently clasped before his chest. You didn't speak either. It felt as if any word from you would shatter the space around you like the surface of a still lake. A moment later, he opened his eyes, turned the bowl once on the table, and said softly, "Today is the day I fast." You didn't ask why. But he continued, as if speaking to himself each month, "I spend one day without eating. Not because of poverty, not to punish myself, but to remember that I lack nothing." No notes were taken, no ceremony performed. The day of fasting ended with a soft, relieved sigh, like someone returning from a long inner journey that no one but himself knew about. That night, you ate dinner alone. The rice was no better than any other day, but you ate with a gratitude you had never felt before. You were grateful for the empty bowl, grateful for the hunger, grateful even for yourself for having dared to sit still. And that night, you slept with a full stomach, not from the rice, but because, finally, you had learned how to have nothing and still feel whole.